And I immediately got a DM from Dane himself. He was asking me to take it down. I wrote and I said, no, you're a notorious joke thief. Fuck you. I like my mornings to be slow. I want the day to romance me a bit before it tries to fuck me. Your words are your words, and you might articulate it in a way that hits people that their words didn't.
Welcome to Mic Drop, the podcast where relevancy is irrelevant and we don't give a shit about your feelings. Ladies and gentlemen, as always, it's both an honor and a pleasure to welcome my next guest to the podcast. He is a writer, creator, instigator. He's not your dad. Are you sure about that?
Positive.
You're positive.
It's the one thing I'm sure of.
All right. He did write Speech Therapy, Fucking History, and Feel Free to Quote Me series. He did teach the most interesting man in the world how, in fact, to be even more interesting. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the stage, Kyle Creek, a.k.a. The Captain.
Thanks for having me, Mike.
Thanks for coming on. What if you had to pick one quote of yours, right, and you only get to pick one, and you have to pick one that you're going to tattoo on your back for eternity, what is that quote?
First of all, I don't have backspace available anymore.
Let's say you did.
Let's say I did. It'd probably be my one about, I like my mornings to be slow. I want the day to romance me a bit before it tries to fuck me.
Is that right?
Because it's something that I actually I take pretty seriously. I try to wake up early to allow myself to have time to kind of mellow into the day. I'm not one of those people that wakes up and gets right at it.
Yeah.
And so no matter where I am, I'm someone that always wakes up probably half hour earlier than I need to, because I have to have that quiet time. I like to enjoy my coffee. And so that quote's funny, but it also is something that I really abide by.
Yeah. Is there, are there other things other than just kind of waking up earlier than you need to essentially spit on the tip and ease the morning in?
I usually avoid my phone for the first hour if possible. I'm not the best at that, but I find that if I wake up, lately I've started leaving my phone in the other room when I go to bed. So I wake up, I don't touch my phone. I like to enjoy my coffee. I usually don't let my dog out for the first hour either, because I want time just to myself.
Yeah. Does he sleep in the?
He has his own room.
Oh, I got you.
I got a Great Dane. He's got his own. He's got his own room and his own bed, and so we put him in his room at night and shut the door, and he has his own little space. Or else he'll be up in the bed with us all night.
Yeah. How old is the dog?
He's 2.5.
Oh shit! God damn, 2.5 got his own room already. Yeah. What's your favorite beard product?
Favorite beard product?
Do you have one?
Water.
Water.
I've never used anything in my beard.
That's fucking awesome.
Everyone who's reached out to me trying to get me to promote their product, I've just politely declined. No, it's completely natural. I've never put anything in it.
Yeah. I mean, I've tried oils and waxes and shit a couple of times. Same kind of thing. It's like, dude, you got to try this.
I won't even try it. I've had people come up to me and like try and spray it on me. Like when it was first getting really popular, probably 2016, 17, a lot of people were doing beard products that have like, attractive girls in bars out trying to hawk it at you.
Yeah.
And I've had people try and help block it. But no, the only thing that's ever gotten in it is stuff that unintentionally gets in it when I'm eating or drinking.
It's food, yeah. Is there a particular food that causes bigger problems than others?
I don't eat sandwiches much anymore.
Yeah.
It really depends on the length of my mustache too.
Yeah.
If I let it go too long, I only order foods I can eat with a knife and fork.
Yeah.
Which kind of becomes a pain in the ass, but at the same time, it kind of forces you to be a little healthier too.
Yeah. Plus, you look refined.
Yeah, I dig it.
I can imagine you drinking a foamy fucking Guinness right out of the draft is going to...
I always have a napkin. It's the same with I always tell my girlfriend that's when I know I need to cut my mustache is when I have to wipe my face too much drinking coffee in the morning. Because every time I put the cup down, I'll see a splatter of it on the table in front of me. And if that happens like more than every sip, I'd say, all right, I got to trim this down.
Yeah. Why do you drink coffee through a straw? Here, let me show you.
It's not the same.
Yeah. What is your best internet troll story?
I don't engage with them too much. I can't really think of one.
What is
I got one. Here's a good one for you. I forgot about this. Like 2017, Dane Cook, the comedian, posted something that I had written. And I'm used to people doing that. It happens often with my work. But to have a comedian do it, let alone a comedian who's been called out on doing that stuff before.
And fairly well known.
Yeah, and fairly well known. I mean, he was someone at one point that when I was younger, I thought was pretty good.
Yeah.
And he posted a shark quote I'd written about, do sharks complain about Monday? I think everyone's seen it at this point. It's been, shared, far and abroad. And I looked at it for a second. I was like, do I say something about this?
So it was no credit to you whatsoever?
No credit at all.
Oh.
And I thought, okay, it's just someone reposting a meme they found it was funny. But then I saw the comments. People were saying, oh, this is so great. And the way he was responding, he was taking credit for it.
Yeah.
And that's when I was like, oh. And I texted my buddy and I was like, watch what I'm about to do on Instagram. And I took a screenshot of his post. I took a screenshot of the comments. And I wrote this big, long post about, imagine, your career not being able to, sustain itself once social media happens and all this kind of stuff. And I just ripped him apart.
Yeah.
And I immediately got a DM from Dane himself.
Oh, no shit.
And he was asking me to take it down. And I wrote and I said, no, you're a notorious joke thief. Fuck you. And I went and looked at his page and I had left a comment on his post, and probably within 15 minutes, my comment had over 5,000 likes on it. And so awesome. People were going after him.
Yeah.
And he wrote me again, asked me to take it down. And I said, no, fuck you.
Yeah. I mean, couldn't he just take
And then he deleted the post.
Yeah.
And so then he deleted the post when he realized I wasn't going to take down my post about him. And then for like the next couple weeks, because people kept bringing it up to me, they're like, oh, I can't believe, you went after Dane like that. And for the next couple weeks, I would check his Twitter and I would watch, he would post retorts to stuff I was tweeting. Because I would tweet stuff and then I would look at what he was saying and I was like, he thinks this is about him. Because a lot of the stuff I write, it's more or less like, if the shoe fits kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so I was writing just general, advice like I always do. I had totally, forgotten about him, wasn't doing it, other than the fact that I was looking to see that he was still bothered. And it was like weeks.
Oh, shit.
He would like have retorts and he would use the same language I used trying to respond to me.
Yeah.
So that's probably the best troll story I have, because it's the only time I've really gone after someone. Because I'm pretty used to it. And a lot of my writing, I figure when I put it out there, I'm accepting the fact it's going to be taken, away from me and my credit's going to get lost on it. It's just what happens these days. Yeah. But yeah, that was a good time.
To me, like there's a level of just pathetic that accompanies that's kind of embarrassing. Like for him to go that
at that
far
level too.
Yeah,
especially because I know he beefed with Joe Rogan at one point. I know a couple of the comedians that called him out, and I think as a comedian or as any kind of creator, you should have some respect for other creators.
Yeah.
Like if you're going to post something or share something you didn't create, make it known that you didn't create it. Yeah. If he had just posted it and not responded the way he did in the comments, it was the fact he was taking credit for in the comments that was like, all right, I'm going to go after this guy.
Fuck this guy. Do you watch The Office?
No. I've seen a couple episodes. It's not my style of comedy.
Really?
I think what turned me off to The Office is the fact that so many people are complete fanboys for it.
Yeah. I mean, to me, like, agreed with both The Office and Game of Thrones, and there's a few shows that I would agree, and that like I was resistant to them for a long time because of that. But then I was like, you know what, fuck it, I'm at least going to give it a shot. And both of those pleasantly surprised me that way. The
Office is clever.
Yeah, I mean,
and I think you're going to talk about when Michael Scott quotes Wayne Gretzky and then puts himself after the quote. Yeah, at least he still had Wayne in there, though. No, that's the way you should do it.
Yeah, it's fucking classic. So yeah, I mean, basically, if Michael Scott does a better job of giving somebody credit than you do, then you're probably fucking hurting. What do you think the reason for human existence is?
Oof, you're getting deep right off the bat.
I like to break it in, with some easy shit and then hit you over the head with a lead pipe.
I would think the reason for human existence is to reach our full potential. And that's going to be different for everybody. And I think that's where a lot of people sell themselves short, is they try to follow too much in somebody else's footsteps. And when you do that, you tend to negate or forget about the things that make you unique. And if you can embrace what you feel like your offering to this world is and pursue that, that's the only way you're ever going to reach your full potential rather than fitting into someone else's mold. And if we lived in a world where everybody was pursuing their full potential, you'd have like that Atlantis kind of city where it's just this incredible melting pot of high performing individuals. And I don't know that we're ever going to get there. Because like we were talking about before this, I mean, a lot of us are influenced whether we like it or not. And I think when you allow yourself to be too influenced, you forget your own influence.
Yeah. No, I agree. And I think, I mean, to me, I think there's a distinction between like the purpose of life versus the reason for our existence. I mean, I love the answer. I guess I'm curious more from a creator standpoint. Why do you think human beings are here?
Why do I think human beings are here?
Do you think it's an accident? Do you think it's designed? Do you think if it is designed, if it's by quote unquote God or something?
I grew up LDS. I grew up Mormon.
Really?
I grew up in Utah most of my life. For the large part of my life, I was, in that faith. I was about 15, 16 years old when I started falling away. And so I did for a long time believe in God and the creator and all that stuff. And once I started being able to really question it and find what I identified with, I went polar opposite, and I became very anti any kind of religion. And that probably put me deeper in a hole than any other pursuit in my life, was my choice to really deny that there was an ultimate purpose to living. And it wasn't until 2019 when I had like a big mental health kind of breakdown that I started opening myself up to the idea that there was something more. And I wouldn't say I was atheist. I was just someone that didn't want to have the conversation ever. I didn't want to think about it. It was something that I just chose to not even consider. Now I'm at a point where I don't know if there is a God or if there's something I would consider a God. But I talked about this recently with my buddy Andy Frisella on his podcast. I believe we're all connected with energy. And it sounds, kind of hippy dippy, but I've had too many things in my life happen with strange connectiveness to make me not believe that.
Yeah.
And for me to believe any other way sounds sad.
Yeah.
I like the idea that we're all connected because it makes me feel like there is a lot of hope for humanity. And right now, particularly, I think there's like an anti-human element to a lot of people's political ideologies, for example, where the kind of stuff that we're trying to pass, the kind of stuff that we're trying to promote is like anti the progression of the human race. So I don't know if that answers your question, because it is something that I've recently opened myself up to. So I don't have the answer exactly, but I do believe that we're all connected in a way that we can't explain.
Oh, for sure it does. And I would say very similarly, like I didn't grow up Mormon in Utah, but I grew up Lutheran in Iowa, which, while maybe it's not quite as strict, it's not even close to being as strict, but it's still very structured and choreographed, as far as...
Choreographed is a good word for it.
Like this is what you should think and this is how things are, and what have you. And so, I did this 3-year confirmation process, and the first couple of years that I was in the military, I was, going to one of these like more progressive, like Life Church kind of places that... it's like...
Or the pastor has a ponytail and he's a cool young guy.
Yeah.
He's got a couple tattoos.
Yeah. Well, he was actually he was a former NFL football player, but same kind of thing, like this larger than life personality. Like the biggest draw is the pastor and the fact that it's like, it's not your dad's church kind of place. It's like this new fun, there's singing and fucking rock bands and, and whatever. And I was totally into it. And then I went on deployment the first time and that really opened my eyes and kicked me in the proverbial nuts as it relates to religion. And I was just like, okay, there's two huge epiphanies that I'm having in as far as religion goes, which is number one is that, human beings are fucking terrible creatures by and large, or there is a lot of evil on the planet that I didn't realize existed.
I think by nature we're not. I think by nature we're pretty good, but the societies we've been pushed into, and I think, again, talking about influence, it's very easy to become a piece of shit.
Yeah. Have you traveled abroad much?
Not as much as you have.
Yeah. I mean, that I would agree in that most places here, I think inherently most people are good. And
most people just want to live a life that they want to have their family. They want to be left alone. They want to be happy. Yeah. But then there's that potential for evil that people can't comprehend.
Yeah. But when you go to places where the majority of the population, it's a legitimate struggle for them just to survive. That's where you see human nature goes from what most people think of human nature here versus much more of the lizard brain, animalistic, like it's a dog eat dog. I will rip your fucking throat out if you have what I want type of environment out of necessity.
Yeah.
And so you see, it goes from where, here, there's pockets of towns that have that, there's individuals that are fucking evil that will take shit from old people and whatever, but those are more anomalies or exceptions, whereas most people are going to help the old lady cross the street, or, the 70-year-old dude falls down, they're going to help him get up, or a kid's pinned under a car and 19 people fucking flip it over, shit like that happens, and that's kind of what we're used to here. But again, when there's such a reliance, or I think that level of human nature and quote unquote civility hinges on a certain level of, like not financial, but a combination of financial, technological, and resource flexibility for people to be comfortable enough to be able to be that way. Where
you become a product of your environment at that point. Like if you're thrust into something where you have no option but survival, you're gonna forget what it means to be a human.
And so that's some places where overwhelmingly that is the society, is that the government can't take care of anybody, nor do they even try. There's these tyrannical dictatorships where there's 3 or 4% of the population that's really, really well off in the super upper middle class, and then everybody else is living in cardboard boxes and killing each other over scraps. And so that was kind of the first thing, was saying that hey, there's a lot of fucking people out here that aren't like where I grew up and don't have the same value systems and morality kind of infused and ingrained in them at an early age to be decent and based off of certain things. And the other thing was too, is just on the religious front, is in a lot of these places too, is there are religious sects that are vastly different. I mean, polar opposites from what I grew up with, and they're all equally convinced that they're as correct as I thought I was growing up. Mm-hmm. And the only difference is geographical, right? And what they experienced. And so it becomes, blatantly obvious very quickly that, that okay, you're conditioned no different than the fucking Easter Bunny or Santa Claus that you thought was real until you get to a certain age where you realize it isn't. But to me, religion is infused and conditioned on young children the exact same way all over the fucking planet. And
this is what I was talking about growing up Mormon. I got to the age where I could question it. This is my problem with organized religion in general.
Yeah.
It's the same with identity politics.
Yeah.
Like when you start believing you're too right, when you forget that other people were once just like you, and they were, maybe it was their father or their neighbor kind of ingrained this belief system in them. You create that divide for no reason.
Yeah.
But I think if we can strip it back and realize that we're all susceptible to influence, we all are a product of our environment to some extent, whether people believe they are or not. It allows you to have some grace that is crucial in this world right now.
Yeah. I couldn't agree more. And I guess my point in all of that was that very similarly, like I grew up kind of in that same way of being pretty predominant in that direction, and then kind of had to come to Jesus of like, dude, what the fuck, and swung with an overcorrection so far the other way that I didn't even want to hear about it for a number of years. And then, in the last, I'd say probably 4, 5, 6 years have kind of come full circle where I'm definitely not religious, but I agree in that I think that there is an energy connection between human beings. But I also think, in researching and reading and just, hearing much bigger, smarter minds than my own talking about the kind of the symbiotic relationship between, on a cellular level, on the micro all the way up to the universe, and in terms of how it's structured, is that it's all the same. It's basically orders of size or magnitude. Mm-hmm. But the structure of cells to the universe is basically a carbon copy. It's graduated up, the cell, the human body, our solar system, the universe, it expands, but it's all, kind of geared the same way. Makes me think that there's more to it than just there's some weird fucking dinosaur that turned into a fucking chimp that turned into a human that
I would agree. It's too complex, and at the same time it's too perfect to have just be happenstance.
Yeah,
I just don't know what it is.
Yeah.
But to kind of relay what you're saying, it sounds like we had very similar paths where we were raised very religious, went polar opposite, and then you come back and you realize there's a certain amount of peace in acknowledging that there is something bigger than you.
For sure.
I think a lot of, atheist culture prides himself on being intelligent. There's a lot of quotes about, no intelligent man believes in God kind of thing. I can't remember who said that, but it's a very dismal existence.
Yeah.
And
like, well,
it's hard to find, it's hard to find meaning, and it's hard when those times get tough to feel like you can pull yourself out of the rut if you don't believe there's a bigger thing at play.
Yeah, I agree. And that it kind of reminds me, it begs the question, and kind of reminds me of the, that scene in the Matrix with the Oracle about saying, hey, don't worry about that. And he turns around and knocks it. And she's like, the big question is if I hadn't said that, would you have still knocked it over? Is that, to me, that reminds me of this, is that how much of that kind of identity or purpose that human beings almost search for because they need something to live for, or they need a reason to be alive, and not just throw themselves off a fucking bridge, Well,
I think we crave the answer.
Yeah.
And I think allowing yourself to be open to the fact that you don't know makes it easier.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm comfortable not having a definitive answer of what it is. Yeah. And I'm comfortable with the idea of leaving it open-ended. I think a lot of people they need the answer. They need to know in order to find some purpose.
Yeah.
And that's why religion's created, and that's why religion is a stronghold in a lot of people's lives.
Yeah. I think it's those same people that can't go on a vacation winging it, right? It's like,
I can't go on a vacation and plan shit.
Yeah.
I have to wing it. That's the point of a vacation, because my life is so regimented when I am home and working. Yeah. The whole point of going on vacation is to not have a schedule.
I agree. Yeah. I mean, to me, it's like, I'm not going to make a hotel reservation. The only thing I'm going to plan is if being able to do something that I know I want to do, like let's say it's a specific resort in a place, or whatever, but outside of that, it's I'm going to go there and figure it out and see what happens.
Yeah, I book flights, and then I usually book the hotel the day before.
Yeah,
and that's actually the best way to get a good deal on a hotel too.
Yeah, no shit. But I think there's a correlation between those people, joking about the vacations, but I think that's a pattern. It's a personality trait where the people that need that answer are the same people that have to have every fucking minute of every day planned out for them, or they lose their fucking mind, and those people make shitty entrepreneurs usually too, because it doesn't work that way, but you kind of already talked about your morning routine, but I want to, if we could talk about when you're in town, it sounds like we have an understanding of what the first hour or two is like, but past that, is there, a certain, I eat at this time, I don't eat, I fast until X, I work out at this time, or I don't, or is there anything else that you'd like to add to that first few hours?
When I'm home and I'm in my routine and in my mode, and I used to be someone who hated routine. I thought routine made me uncreative.
Yeah.
And I used to try and wing my life a lot, and it really got unmanageable, and I was drinking a lot, and it just became chaotic, and I wasn't getting the work done I wanted to get done. So I embraced routine probably the last year. Partially because I did Andy Frisella's 75 Hard program.
Oh, shit.
And I actually just finished the Live Hard, the full 1 year mark of it. And I saw so much positive come from the routine with how productive I was, that I started kind of exploring the routine that was right for me. And so I don't wake up to an alarm when I'm home. It's something I always wanted to do. I always used to think, man, not waking up to an alarm would be like the shit.
Until you do it.
It works for me. I don't wake up to an alarm.
Yeah.
I don't wake up to an alarm. I don't schedule any meetings or anything before noon, unless it's very dire or a client needs to get hold of me. I don't schedule anything before noon. I usually get up around 7:30. I take my first hour to myself. By then, my girlfriend and my son is probably up. We'll have coffee together, and then I either take the dog for a walk, or I take my son for a walk. I flip-flop every other day with them, and I go walk for about an hour, hour and a half, out in the sweltering heat of South Miami where I live, and I love it. Just take my shirt off, I just go sweat, come back feeling like you got out of a sauna. I'll make my son breakfast when I get back, because he's usually hungry immediately, and then I don't eat until afternoon. I try to only eat between the hours of 12 and 8.
Yeah.
So I kind of do intermittent fasting, but then after I eat, I usually block off 1 to 5 is my primary writing time. I find that I'm fairly energetic there. And because I'm on the East Coast, I can take meetings later in the day too. So after 5, I might start to schedule a couple meetings, which would be, in LA 2 or 3 in the afternoon.
Yeah.
But really I try and control my day as much as possible. Because you're just saying, when you're an entrepreneur, and a lot of writing's being an entrepreneur, stuff comes at you fast. I like to control what I can.
Yeah.
So then when stuff does go, haywire, I have like the leeway to make it work.
Yeah.
So some days they're completely opposite. Some days I have to get up early. I'm on calls all day. Sometimes I have back-to-back meetings depending on what I'm working on. But I try to control it as much as I can.
That first hour that you take to yourself, what are you doing in that time?
Thinking.
Just thinking?
I just sit and think. I try not to be on my phone. I just like enjoy the silence. I actually on Sundays don't use my phone at all anymore. I haven't been as good with it lately because I'm traveling a lot. But when I am home or when I'm in I'll do it this Sunday because I'll be in Park City, Utah with family. I put my phone away Saturday night in a drawer and I don't touch it till Monday morning.
Oh, shit.
I don't use it for GPS. I don't use it to order food. I don't use it for anything. If someone needs to get a hold of me, they call my girlfriend or they call a friend of mine to get a hold of me. They can come to my house.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things where they say we teach people how we'd like them to treat us. So for the first month or two I did it, I would notify people on Instagram. I could post on my story, partly because it's the easiest way to reach all my friends at once, but also because I wanted to encourage people to try it themselves. And the first day I did it was Super Bowl Sunday. And I forgot it was the Super Bowl until about 8 o'clock that night. I was out on a run and I heard someone shouting at their TV and I was like, oh shit, that's right. It's the Super Bowl today. And it was fantastic. And so I've really detached myself from social media a lot. So that first hour is critical for me, but those Sundays are my days.
Yeah.
And it's helped my writing. I was telling someone this recently because when I go on walks or I go on runs, I don't take my phone. I'll go to the gym without headphones. I don't bring my phone anywhere. And so
you're not listening to hot jams when you're
nothing.
working?
Like I'll listen to whatever they're playing over the loudspeakers at the gym, which it's usually god awful.
Yeah.
But I'll go on runs and I'll see, I have a thing for like old Victorian homes. I love old houses and there's a lot of them in my area, and I'll see a house and I want to take a photo of it and I don't have my phone on me. So I think to myself, how would I describe this house in 5 words? Or like I'll see a really cool bird I've never seen before and I'll think the same way. And it's helped me writing because it's helped me get really descriptive with things by not having my phone on those days. And so now I do it mentally because I need it, but also because professionally I think it's the right thing for my career.
Yeah. No, it makes a ton of sense. For me, if I imagine doing that same thing, the one bit of, I would say, almost anxiety that I'm curious if you run into that I would imagine I would is the knowing the piling up of...
No, because people will really stop writing on Sundays. I get messages from friends and they'll say, or like business associates, and they'll say, I know I won't hear from you till tomorrow.
Yeah.
Because I've taught them that I don't use my phone on Sundays. And it used to be the first couple weeks, I'd turn my phone on Monday and it'd just be ratchets of messages. Now it's like 3.
Yeah, that's
people just don't. They're about to send it and they go, wait, Kyle's not on his phone. So it's actually become really peaceful and easy to do now.
That's nice. I guess the one tricky part for me is from a client standpoint. Like I've got a lot of personal protection dog clients, and if there's an emergency or something like that, like there's an issue with a dog. I'll talk to you in 48 hours. They'd be like, are you fucking serious? Like, so that's the one bad part.
So you got to set up a dedicated line that's a flip phone that only is for people that call you in dog emergencies. And you keep a flip phone.
It would get abused.
You keep a flip phone in your pocket and just give it to your dog clients.
Yeah, that's a good. Yeah, I mean, there's a way around it, I'm sure, but it's an interesting.
Once you do it once or twice, you crave it. Yeah. They become your days, and you look forward to them. Like I don't sleep in on Sundays. Like I'll get up at like 4 a.m. sometimes because I'm excited to see what I can do with my day. Like I woke up at 4 a.m. not too long ago. I sat on my porch and read a book while the sun came up. I read for about 2 or 3 hours. Yeah. Everyone in my house was still down, so I put my book away. I went on an hour-long run, and I came back. It was probably 8 a.m., and they were just starting to get up, and I'd already had this incredibly peaceful morning to myself.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. What book was it?
I was reading The War of Art.
Oh, okay.
I've read that book. I read that probably 2 or 3 times a year.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I find it's a very, very, whenever I want to start a new project, I like refresh myself on it.
That's cool. Eating wise, do you subscribe or prescribe to a specific eating regimen, or you just kind of?
I experimented a lot doing the 75 Hard program. And I found that I'm best on a primarily meat and fruit diet. My energy levels are better. I don't drink as much caffeine. I tried like the paleo thing, but I was always lightheaded and I was always dizzy. And my primary focus is trying to maximize my creativity in my brain because that's what I enjoy and that's also how I make my money.
Yeah.
And meat and fruit for me makes me feel stimulated. I'm not, don't have hunger pains. And so that's primarily what I eat is meat and fruit.
Yeah. Have you tried like super low carb where it's like you're starving your brain and liver and muscle tissue with glycogen and that fucks your creativity up? Do you know?
That's kind of like what paleo is, super low carb for me, because I was doing meat and vegetables.
It fucks me up too.
And I felt horrible.
Yeah.
Like I was always dizzy and I would stand up and get lightheaded.
Yeah.
And I didn't think it was the diet. I thought it was something else until I stopped doing it and realized, holy shit, like I feel so much better now.
Yeah, I'm the same way. Like, I've tried a lot of different, super low carb or, high fat. I mean, fucking pick it. I've tried it and agreed. Like I always come back to a fair bit of meat. I mean, I still do eat a fair bit of vegetables, but enough fruit to stay in that realm of at least having enough gas in the tank all the time to be able to do whatever the fuck I want to do.
Well, it helps because I love fruit too.
Yeah, no,
like
same
I fucking
here.
love bananas. There's nothing I like more than a banana, and then you spread honey on it. That's like my favorite thing.
To me, like a super ripe mango that you cut up and then put in the fridge so it's cold.
You need to move to Miami then.
Yeah, I mean,
There's so many mangoes in my neighborhood. People set up tables and they just pile their mangoes on it, and they attach grocery bags to the front of the table.
Jesus.
And so when we go on walks, we'll fill up a grocery bag with mangoes from other people's trees.
Dude, I'm coming.
Because different people have different types of mangoes growing. Like a lot of people grow the red mangoes down there. And you can walk back with like 12 huge mangoes on every walk.
Dude, I'm going from here to Miami.
You should.
Jesus. Man, it sounds like heaven. I love that shit. I love fruit the same way, but. What are the two key components for canine success? That's effective training and proper nutrition. Fueled by Team Dog brings those two components to your family and best friend. The perfect nutritional balance that results in a higher mental acuity, energy, overall vitality, and even an improved appearance. Every product you will find in my company's store was born from the battlefield and not from the boardroom. Let my life's work help you become your dog's hero. So you're originally from Utah. Tell me about kind of growing up on top of what you already have as far as the Mormon experience, your family, and just kind of what encapsulated your childhood.
I had great parents growing up. Great relationship with them. They're still very, LDS, and my brothers aren't anymore either. And we all have a fantastic relationship with them.
Your dad like the bishop of a
he was in the bishopric when I was in high school, but he kind of converted to the church later in his own life, and so he was fairly supportive of me, despite me wanting to break away from it. But we moved a lot growing up. My dad was a professor at BYU, the Brigham Young University.
And you had like the full blown varsity Mormon experience.
Yeah. He was an art professor, and so I grew up in a very creative household. My dad was usually home illustrating most of the day. He worked from home, and my mom was an English editor, and so I grew up very creative, promoted a lot of drawing and writing and stuff like that. And I tell people this often. When I was growing up, like when we had to do chores to earn money for our allowance, my mom would often give us the option: do you want to mow the lawn or do you want to read a book? I'll pay you $3 for either one. Yeah. And I would always opt to read the book. Yeah. And I think back now on it, it's a brilliant thing to do. And so, second, third, fourth grade, I was reading a lot of the classics like The Invisible Man, Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde, 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. I read a lot of Mark Twain. And it was something my mom and I always had as a bond. And then, so growing up, I was around writing a lot. I was around a lot of art, but I didn't really embrace it until college when I was going to school for business. I knew I wanted to be an entrepreneur. I wanted to do my own thing. So I figured if I got a business degree, I could learn the ins and outs of like accounting, stuff like that. And I realized I was getting A's on all my papers, and my professors were complimenting my writing. And so I thought, wow, there's something to this. So then I started asking if I could write for local papers. Can I write your music column? I'll go to concerts. Can I write the music column? So they started letting me do that. I was doing it for free. And from there, I got into advertising, and that kind of really when my career skyrocketed. And that's when I full-blown knew that all I wanted to do in life was write. Like, I can't imagine doing anything else other than being a writer.
Yeah. Did you have siblings growing up?
I do. I have an older brother and a younger brother.
You already said, you said.
Yeah, my older brother is a doctor, and my younger brother is a journeyman electrician.
Okay. And do they live?
My younger brother lives in Seattle, and my older brother lives back in Utah.
From a political standpoint, I mean, you seem from the musings and writings that I've delved into more on the libertarian side. Do they share a similar political stance, or? Yeah,
I grew up. My parents were always Republican.
Yeah.
Especially my dad being, a freelance illustrator is largely how he made his money. He basically worked for himself.
Yeah.
And he always taught me early on that you want to be your own man. You want to plot your own way in life. You know, you want to find a way to make a living for yourself. And I remember, especially in the Mormon church, a lot of Mormons are fairly Republican. And I wasn't even really aware of what a Democrat or a different party was until probably like my early teenage years.
Yeah.
I just kind of assumed everyone thought that way. I'd say now I'm very much middle ground. Like I think most people are. I think to conservatives, I seem liberal, and to liberals, I seem conservative.
Yeah.
And I take that as a compliment because it's like, oh, you mean I'm an independent thinker?
Yeah.
You know, I don't identify with one side. Like, thank you for saying that. And I think that's where most people do fall.
Yeah.
They're just afraid to upset either side at times. Like there's times when I'll post something and half the people will be very offended and half the people will be very for it. And then a week later, I'll post something and it'll completely flip-flop.
Right.
The same people that were for me before are now against me. And that's totally fine with me.
Yeah. Are your brothers similar that way?
Yeah, for sure.
Same. Did you play any sports in high school? You talk about running a lot.
I didn't start running until recently. I hated running. I started running on 75 hard because it sucked.
Yeah.
I never enjoyed running. And so I told myself when I did that program that I would do something I hated. And so that's when I started running.
And now you enjoy it?
I enjoy it now because it sucks.
Yeah.
I still don't like it. I rarely get that runner's high people talk of, but I like coming back and feeling like, damn, like I did it.
Yeah.
In high school, I played football because I'm a bigger guy and it was kind of expected of me. I actually had a college scholarship for a defensive end at a local state university.
Shit.
And I showed up for training camp. I dislocated my knees twice in high school. I got submarine blocked. And I dislocated my knee again the first week of camp.
Oh, wow.
And I got into Percocet and OxyContin.
Really?
And I decided that I liked partying more than football.
Oh, shit.
And so I turned in my pads one day to my coach, and I spent probably 3 semesters just completely fucking off.
Really?
Yeah, it was the first time I lived away from home. I was down in St. George, Utah at Dixie State, which at the time I was there was like a known party school.
Yeah.
And I ended up getting really bad into OxyContin. I had a lot of buddies that started, migrating into heroin. And I had a buddy that was my roommate overdose. And I just saw a lot of other friends' lives falling apart. And I remember I went to a party on a Friday night and I woke up Sunday night in my room and I don't remember anything about Saturday.
Wow.
And the only reason I knew it was Sunday is because one of my roommates in the house we were living in was still Mormon and he was in his church clothes. I was like, what are you doing? He's like, Kyle, it's Sunday night. Like, where have you been? I was like, I don't know.
Holy shit.
And I called my dad that night and I said, Dad, I have a drug problem. I can't be down here anymore. And within 24 hours, my dad was there with his truck and a trailer and we loaded up all my shit and I moved back to Salt Lake. And I took a couple months off and I got back in school. I ended up getting, 3 business degrees in 3 years. I just really hammered school out and pulled my shit together. But I kind of just replaced my drug use with alcohol. I spent a good time drinking my fair share.
Yeah.
But I got through it and I got school done and I got on with my life and I'm glad I did. But yeah, sports for me were something I kind of felt obligated to do just because, in a small town in Utah too, like that was kind of the thing.
Yeah. Going back to the Percocet, OxyContin use, how did that start other than the obvious like pain meds for your knee or whatever? But like, where did it migrate or when and how did it go from I'm taking it because I'm fucked up to where I need to take this shit because I like it?
It's very easy for it to go there. It feels great. I had Percocet and I had a buddy show me that I should snort them instead of swallow them. And that was how it happened. Because I was taking them and my buddy's like, you're taking them wrong. And I was like, what do you mean? And I did it the first time and I loved the feeling of it. And at the time I was 19, I couldn't get alcohol. It was very hard to get in Utah unless you had a good fake ID. And it was very easy to get prescription pain meds. And so I'd go to parties and I would just take, a little, 5 or 6 pills with me and I'd hand them out to friends and we would just take pain pills.
And so would you normally snort them or?
I would almost always snort them.
Yeah.
Like I felt they were a waste if they weren't being snorted.
So in terms of the feeling that you get to, or comparing the feeling of taking it, swallowing it versus, is it instant with snorting?
It's instant. And I started to crave what they call the drip when you feel it in the back of your throat, you feel like this numbing sensation that I really got into.
Really?
And yeah, so for a couple of years, that was my thing. My favorite thing to do was to go to the mall on Oxycontin. I liked socializing when I was like really mellowed out on it. And so I would go to the mall. I mean, my buddies would just, dumb 19-year-olds just walk around high on pills.
Yeah. I mean, the only time I've taken Percocet was I tore my left tricep. It's been about 3.5 years now. And for the few days after the surgery repair, and then once I started doing physical therapy, that first few weeks I was doing that, I took it then too because it was pretty painful. But that's my only experience with it. I mean, I'm curious. I will say I never took any of that shit. So as a 40-year-old was the first time I had ever taken any opiate-based pain med, and it was the night I had the surgery in the morning, and that night I was like, motherfucker, this thing is killing me. And my parents had come into town to help take care of me because I was living by myself at the time. And my dad was like, well, they gave you this shit. And I was like, well, fuck it, I'm going to try one. And I took one, and like 15 minutes later, it was like this wave of euphoria washed over my entire body. And I was like, holy fucking shit, that stuff is amazing. Yeah, I mean, immediately it's like, I get why people have a really hard time with this shit now. I feel very fortunate in that even though I have kind of an OCD type personality, I've not had any issues with being addicted to stuff. Even when I chewed tobacco, like I could quit for months or years at a time, at the drop of a hat, and really didn't struggle with that. But I will say I've seen enough people have a lot of trouble with it. I'm curious, like the difference between the euphoria feeling snorting it versus...
It just hits you quicker, and you don't get like that sick to your stomach feeling that some people get. A lot of people don't like prescription medication because it makes them sick to their stomach. I never dealt with that when I would snort them.
Does the euphoria last as long when you snort it?
I don't know. I don't think I tried it enough the other way to know, honestly. It was fairly quickly that I got into abusing them.
Yeah.
I didn't use them correctly long at all. Like as soon as some other members on the team or friends of mine found I got a prescription for it, it was very quickly like, oh shit, like let's get some of this from him too.
Yeah. So, I mean, how much were you taking a day at your worst?
It depended on the day. I mean, like if I went out to like a party, it was pretty common that I would take 280s of OxyContin with me, and over the course of the night, I'd probably snort both of those.
Yeah. So you're not snorting a full one at once? No,
you do the full one at once, it'll just kick your ass.
Yeah.
And that's still pretty fucked up though.
Yeah.
But there were nights, I mean, that night that I forgot a day and a half, I don't even know what I ingested. I remember taking, I had swallowed a bunch of Suboxone, which is another kind of prescription pain pill they actually give you to help you get off them.
Oh, okay.
Which is just like a lower dose.
Yeah.
It's just a completely fucked racket. So,
wow.
I don't know what like my limit or casual use was, but it was as often as I could get a hold of it, I was using it.
Yeah. My
bigger issue later in life was how much I started drinking.
Okay.
That became like an everyday thing for me for quite a while.
Yeah. What was when you called your dad and you went back home, was there that like textbook withdrawal issue where you were like all fucked up and it was hard to come off of that stuff?
Yeah, I mean, I had like the sweats and stuff, and I felt really anxious and irritable, and I just kind of stayed in the room, and it probably took me a week or two until I stopped having like headaches.
Yeah.
But I was pretty motivated at that time to stop using them, and I haven't ever used a prescription pain pill since.
Yeah.
I actually got a chemical burn really bad on my hand about 6-7 years ago, and the doctor wanted me on pain medication. I said, not going to happen.
Yeah.
I'll deal with it. I don't even take ibuprofen.
Oh, wow.
I haven't taken any kind of ibuprofen, Tylenol in probably over 15 years.
Yeah. Wow. So that transfers into booze. Was it quickly thereafter?
Yeah, but it was more or less a social thing. I think I'd gotten so used to the social lubricant of opiates, going to parties, being like that euphoria you feel, that it became very easy to just replace that with the social aspect of alcohol. And then I didn't think I had a problem with it until I just realized that I wasn't using it out of physical dependency, but mental dependency. I just become so accustomed to drinking, especially with my career. As I got into advertising, I got into a lot of hospitality consulting. I was working on bars and hotels as a creative director, and I had a very successful career. I was living in New York City, and I ran an office of about 15 employees, all creatives, and I worked on some large scale projects in New York. But drinking was not only something I did because I enjoyed it, but it was more or less like almost a brand I'd created for myself, where clients would want to work with me because they knew like after the project was done, we could go to the strip club and party.
Yeah.
And they knew that I would still show up at 8 a.m. and I wouldn't miss my meeting and I would get my job done. And so I prided myself on the fact that I was high functioning, even though I drank a lot. Yeah. And in 2019, when I had like that real mental kind of breakdown and was in the pits of life, is when I told myself like, I need some clear thinking in my life. I need to move away from this brand I've created for myself. And that was the first time I'd ever been sober for more than a week in probably, 7 or 8 years. But I went 100 days totally sober. And now like I rarely drink at all. Yeah. Partially because 75 hard. And now with my son and where my career is and the productivity that I realized I have without it, it's hard for me to justify wanting to be hungover.
Yeah.
Like I don't mind being drunk, but being hungover to me is like the worst thing in the world.
Yeah. No, I agree. I mean, I almost never drink. I couldn't tell you the last time I had one. I've never been much of a drinker though. I mean, I was having this conversation with my kids uncomfortably the other day, actually. They're, cause they're that age and asking me, hey, did you do anything in high school? And I'm not going to bullshit them. I'm not going to condone or allow them to do it, but I'm still going to, level with them. It was like I drank twice in high school. I tried smoking weed once, and it was like not even weed. It was like fucking oregano or catnip or something stupid that a neighbor kid was fucking playing a joke or whatever. But that was it. And then I didn't drink. I didn't actually drink until I was 21. Even being in the Navy, I just never really messed with it, with very, very rare exceptions. And even when I was 21, like I did the 21 experience for 2, maybe 3 months. But I was in a SEAL platoon, like living in Coronado, training hard, partying hard. Mm-hmm. And even then, like I still, I drank a few nights a week or whatever, but that was it. And then even from then, from being 22 until now in my early 40s, like I've just never been a big drinker. It just never has really done much for me for that reason. It's like, whether it's working out or just trying to get shit done or whatever, like it's just a hurdle that gets in the way and ends up being not, the juice isn't worth the squeeze. That little bit of fun time isn't worth, being dehydrated and feeling like shit the next day and me not being able to do what I need to do. And it fucks me up, and I've never been a huge fan of it. But
I wish that I had the drive I have now, 5-6 years ago, but it's definitely something that comes with age.
Yeah.
Because I was very content living in a high rise in New York City, making a good salary. I was traveling often to meet with clients around the country for hotels and bars. And being hungover is it's just part of my job.
Yeah.
And I would just wake up, I'd have like a Bloody Mary in the morning. I'd get rid of my hangover, a little bit of a buzz, and I was functioning very well. And at that time I'd still had, 4 successful book launches. And I just kind of figured it was, just what it took for me to be creative, or what it took for me to kind of enjoy my life. I was single, and, if I had the drive I have now and didn't spend so much time fucking off, I'd be so much farther in my career.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I don't regret any of it. Yeah. I'm fortunate in the sense that, I never got a DUI. I never had anything serious happen to me. I had a lot of friends that have caused a lot of harm in their life, and I've never hurt anyone else. And so I kind of feel like I was given my little get out of jail free card because I had a lot of fun and nothing really serious happened from it.
Yeah. No, that's, I agree in that, like, there's things that I think people look back on and they have regrets or they wish they hadn't done this. And I'm like, nothing falls into that category for me because I love where I'm at now. And a lot of the things that I care about or that are important or that I have learned are only a result of some of the things that have happened in the past. And I wouldn't have those experiences had I, done everything differently. So,
well, and I had this thought earlier when you brought up the Matrix about, would you have done that if I hadn't said something? And I have that mindset in a lot of my life. Would I be where I'm at now if I hadn't done what I've done?
Yeah, it's hard.
Would I have written that book had I not experienced what I've experienced? And so it helps me give purpose to everything, and it's eliminated almost all regret in my life. Yeah. Like I still have moments where you regret things, everyone does, but it's very short-lived for me once I give it purpose like that, and I realize that all of it's part of the story. All of it can become inspiration for me to talk to others. It can become something I write about, and once I have that outlook, like, you don't regret even your dumbest shit.
Yeah, no, I agree. And to me, that perspective is the key to ultimately to happiness, because to me, that's where you derive purpose from, you know? And so I think it's massively important. And as far as the ad campaign stuff, how would you kind of, or you know, I don't know, would you call it an ad executive, or what would you?
I was a copywriter. I started as a copywriter. I eventually became a senior copywriter, then a creative director. And so I basically ran the whole creative team.
So how would you synopsize that as a career and what you took from it before we get into your transition into what you do now?
I learned how to almost turn my creativity on in advertising, because it became a job where I couldn't afford days of not being creative. I think a lot of people wait for a creative inspiration to hit them, but I learned that creative inspiration had to be something I had to tap into, and I needed it when I needed it at the time. Like there's deadlines, there's timelines, like I needed the creativity. And so it taught me how to unlock conceptual thinking, to where I can look at, you know, a lamp in a diner and think, okay, how could that lamp be related to dating? Okay, now if I had a client who was trying to sell that, lamp, how do I make a funny commercial comparing buying a lamp to finding the perfect date? Because now that commercial is going to be memorable and it's relatable to them, because everyone dates at some point. And that level of thinking, or that ability to create a concept, I learned through advertising, and that became very reflected in my work.
Yeah.
A lot of my work is written that way, where I take concepts and I find a way to make them relatable to you in your everyday life.
So, I mean, to me, it's very akin to stand-up comedy.
Absolutely.
Way, you know?
The best advertising should appear almost like stand-up comedy. It should have a little bit of storytelling aspect to it, and it should be either very personal or funny enough that it's memorable.
Yeah. So for those categories, I mean, using the example of a lamp and dating, did you find that there were a handful of categories, dating, driving a car, I mean, whatever it is, that you kind of, that were your gold standards, or that you found yourself going to often to relate?
Yeah, dating for sure, because I was in my 20s when I was doing a lot of it. And so it was something I was experiencing myself. And so I felt like I had a good knowledge of, because, you know, every day it was kind of my thought process is, how do I meet somebody, or how do I get laid, kind of thing, which a lot of 20-year-olds go through. And so it was easy to pull it into my work because it was relatable to me. So definitely dating is where a lot of my work was early on. And then it overall transitioned into more or less, you know, socializing, because I figured socializing was like a broader perspective I could take on things. And then from there, it kind of really, I took kind of a complete flip with my work and started making it really personal, in the sense of, you know, either personal empowerment, encouraging free thought, encouraging people to be themselves. And a lot of that individuality and independence is where most of my work is today. And it's also where most of the creative concepts I do now are about that kind of realm. Because I think now more than ever too, it's very pertinent to people. Yeah. People feel like they've been shoveled into a bunch of different categories now. And so anything you can do to encourage someone to be independent and be themselves, they tend to gravitate towards.
Yeah. I mean, it's fascinating. I'm curious in trying to put myself in that position. I can only assume or imagine that there are instances where you get that kind of writer's block or what have you. When there's the added stress and pressure of, this is what I do for a living, and there's a timeline or a deadline or whatever, were there tips, tricks, you know, mechanisms that you relied on to work through that, or how did you navigate those times?
Getting active. Even when I was at the height of, you know, being fairly unhealthy with my lifestyle, I still did a lot of cardio. I had a gym in my building in New York, and I have never had a writer's block that I haven't been able to get through by doing extended amounts of cardio.
Really?
Some of my best tweets or my best little snippets of work, I've actually tweeted while I was in the gym.
During?
Yeah, like I'll be running, or I'll be on the elliptical or on the bike, and it'll just hit me, and I'll be like, oh shit, that's a great concept, and I'll tweet it immediately. That's always helped me. But like you're saying, so to kind of backtrack and talk about my career progression, it's helpful at this point. When I got into advertising and I was writing these concepts for commercials, I remember I had written a commercial for a furniture company comparing buying a coffee table to looking for the ideal mate. Saying, you know, you don't want someone who's too tall or too short. You know, in the end, you want a coffee table that's stable and that looks good. And that's kind of very similar to dating. You want someone stable, looks good, that fits into your life, fits into your aesthetic. And I thought the commercial was funny. I thought it was brilliant. And they thought it'd be seen as something derogatory or shaming of people's appearance and stuff like that. And
of course they did.
I remember thinking, this is too good of a concept to let it die. I'm going to tweet this. Yeah. And so I took that and I tweaked it into a little tweet format, and I tweeted it, and it did pretty well. And I started, as I was working on campaigns, I would take my A content and I would keep it for myself, and I would tweet it because I figured a client wouldn't appreciate it, and I'd give them all my B and C content. Yeah. And that's how my whole social media following started. Oh. And I kept it very separated as the captain online because I didn't want it to influence my career. I'd had a very difficult time getting into advertising in the first place. I was told that I couldn't work in the realm because I had my fingers tattooed. I was like verbatim told that by someone, like, you're a fantastic writer, but we can't hire you because you have finger tattoos. And so I was very protective of my career. I was afraid to lose it. I was excited, and I was very happy to be making money as a writer. Because you get paid pretty well as a copywriter in advertising, because it's basically the linchpin of all concepts come from the writing first. And so I didn't want to fuck up something good for myself. I had an apartment, I had a truck, and I was getting paid to write. So I kept it separated online. And then eventually I was at a meeting one time in New York, and I remember it very vividly. I was sitting across from some asset managers of a Ritz-Carlton property, which was a hotel I was working on rebranding for them. And older gentleman leans over to me and says, my wife and I, we love your stuff. I was like, what do you mean? He's like, yeah, your Instagram. He's like, I follow you. And that was the first time my worlds had really collided like that. And then I realized that a lot of people wanted to work with me because of my online persona, because I was willing to take risks with my own life and with my creativity. And that's when I started to kind of embrace it, not hide it so much. And that's where I'm at now, where I actually have my real name on my Instagram until 2019, I didn't. People would search high and low trying to figure out who the fuck I was. I never really had personal social media before that. And so it was very easy for me to hide who I was. And now it's the opposite, where I'm proud of my background. I used to, not like talking about that I was raised Mormon. But yeah, it really all kind of changed for me in 2019. And now my world's all just kind of mixed together. Yeah,
that's fucking wild. I'm curious, how did you internally compartmentalize A, B, and C content? Like what process did you go through to say this is A content, I'm keeping this?
If I laugh at it, it's A content. If it makes me laugh, it's A content. If it makes me think someone else will laugh, it's B content. Yeah. If I think it'll make someone simply think, it's C content.
Yeah, that's fucking classic. That's
it's like sometimes when you think of a joke to yourself and you laugh, you know it's fucking good. Yeah. You'll see stand-up comedians do that, great. Where they'll say jokes so good they can't help but laugh at their own joke. Yeah, I like seeing comedians laugh at their own jokes.
Yeah, yeah, no shit. Well, yeah, I mean, it's good then. That's for sure. Do you have a favorite stand-up comic other than Dane Cook?
Oh, I fucking hate that guy. Dave Chappelle. Yeah. I respect Dave Chappelle a lot, not only for his stand-up comedy, but also because I think he's a pioneer of a lot of current comedy style. I mean, the Chappelle Show really created a whole different category of sketch comedy. But also, I admire him as a person because you've seen time and time again, he's willing to stand up for himself. Yeah. And he's willing to have hard conversations. And I like that he can also talk very sincerely and then make you laugh. Yeah. I think very few individuals can do that. And so I'd say by far he's who I respect more than anyone in that comedy world.
Yeah. No, it's tough to argue. I mean, there's a handful that stick out. George Carlin is one of my favorites, both pioneer-wise, and I think he was way ahead of his time.
And his stuff is so relevant today. Yeah. I have not seen more Carlin stuff reposted.
Yeah, it's crazy.
The last 2 years, it's everywhere, and it's something that someone could have done a week ago, and it's still relevant. Yeah. And that's the kind of writing that I try and do as well, and that's why, I talked about earlier, Mark Twain. He's probably my favorite writer as far as like talking about traditional authors, because the stuff Twain addressed in his books, he wrote about human conditions that he knew were always going to be human conditions. Yeah. And you can read his work now, and you can, read some of his short quotes and his analogies of life, and they're as meaningful now as they were, 100 years ago. Yeah.
To me, it's fascinating, speaking of that kind of timeless, of reading shit back from, whether it's philosophers back, 2,000 years ago and everywhere in between, like how so much of that is still similarly, other than some strange translation, glitches.
Yeah, there's a big stoicism movement right now.
Yeah,
you see a lot of stoicism the past, probably 3 to 4 years, because it's timeless.
Yeah,
and it almost makes you as a writer feel, well, shit, everyone's already thought of everything before. Yeah. I had this conversation with someone recently too, where why should I write if people have already written about this stuff?
Yeah.
Because your words are your words, and you might articulate it in a way that hits people that their words didn't.
Yeah.
And I think that's why early on, most writers just want to be original. They try really hard to be original. And originality isn't always the best work. Mm-hmm. And then eventually you get to a point as a writer where you just want to write well, and you want to write stuff that's meaningful. And a lot of the meaningful stuff, other people have also arrived at that conclusion before. Like long, sustained periods of thought are going to lead a lot of humans to a very similar idea of life.
Yeah.
And that's the kind of stuff that people need to write about.
Yeah. I think that's one of those things where simplicity is key too, where it seems obvious when people are trying too hard to be original and they overcomplicate everything.
And you see comedians do that shit too. And your originality might just be fucking really awful too. Yeah. You need to, in order to connect with someone, you almost have to hit them on a level they've been at before.
Yeah.
And that's why, the jokes that everyone remembers the most or laughs at the most are the ones that are personal to them.
Sure.
And you can't arrive at a personal thought, or you can't create a personal joke without having something that someone's already done.
Yeah.
That's if I had to give advice to new writers, because I'm asked that often, it's focused more on writing well than being wholly original.
Yeah. I think that's great. Going back to 2019, where you had this kind of mental health instance, can you talk about that?
Oh, we can definitely talk about it.
What happened? Or where, I guess, where did you realize, like, holy fuck, like the cards are caving in, or what?
So I'd gotten burned out in New York. I quit my agency there. I didn't feel like, advertising was my love anymore. Like you said, it became too much of a job for me, and it made me despise my personal work as well. I didn't want to write at all. I didn't feel any need to create. I was just completely burned out from, burning the candle on both ends for so long. And I was over New York City. I thought I wanted that city life, growing up in Utah. We all kind of rebel against our youth. And to me, moving to New York was like the ultimate example of success. I mean, I came from this small town in Utah. I grew up in Pleasant Grove and Mapleton, Utah, which are little towns.
Where are they in relation to Salt Lake?
About an hour south.
Okay.
Pleasant Grove is probably 40 minutes. Mapleton's about an hour. When I lived in Mapleton, we had, I think, 2 buildings. One building was the rec center / fire department, and the other building was a pizza shop / police office.
That's fucking...
And we had to go into Springville, or we had to go into Spanish Fork, Utah to get anything. So I grew up, I would ride my bike to the reservoir with my pellet gun over one shoulder, my fishing pole over the other. And I loved it. It was a great way to grow up. And so when I got older, I wanted to live in the city. I wanted to experience a different side of life. And I'm glad I did. I think everyone should live in a big city once or twice in their life, because it helps you realize that it's not the answer. I still love New York, not so much anymore. I was back 2 months ago. It's not the same.
Yeah.
But I'd gotten burned out living in New York, and I'd been doing a long distance thing with my girlfriend at the time. Same girlfriend I have now, who I have the son with. And she was living in LA, and I was actually looking at moving to Austin, Texas. I was like, I want to move to Texas. My boots haven't touched anything other than concrete for too long. And she made it very apparent that if I moved to Texas, she was kind of over the long distance thing. And I had some opportunities writing in TV, and I knew some people out there that could probably get me into some TV stuff. So I moved to LA and immediately hated it, regretted it. I did not connect with LA. And I had a really hard time trying to make sense of the decisions I'd made. I felt like I'd fucked up walking away from a career. I missed New York. I missed feeling like I was a part of something. And my career wasn't panning out in LA the way I'd hoped. And I just started spiraling into just like a deep state of depression. And it was something that I kind of always had on the surface for years, but because I was traveling so much and I was so busy with work, I ignored the depression that I was dealing with. Off and on, I'd have periods of time where I wouldn't leave my apartment for 2 or 3 days. I would stay in my apartment in New York and just wallow in my shit in between travels. And it just became so apparent in LA, I couldn't run from it anymore. I didn't have my job to keep me busy. I didn't have any prospects to distract myself. And I started getting to the point where I was ruminating on ending it. And we all at times have had that. And I think we get to points where we almost romanticize the idea of it. But it was to the point that I was actually scaring myself because it was no longer like, romanticizing it. I was actually, how would I do it? Where would I do it? When would I do it? Planning it. And I'd never been that dark before. And my girlfriend started noticing it, and it weighed heavily on her. And we had several conversations about it. And there was times that she told me she was afraid to go to bed because she thought if she fell asleep, I was going to do it that night because she could tell I was in a really bad headspace. And oddly enough, out of the blue, I got a book deal through a major publisher, and I thought, okay, cool. This is going to be what pulls me out. And it was the first major book deal I'd ever had. And I didn't feel anything from it. I wasn't excited, nothing. It was completely numb. And so I kind of just forgot about that as quickly as it came. I signed the papers, but it was just like out of sight, out of mind. And then I realized that I really was in a place that if I didn't do some work, some personal work, it was going to get worse. And my girlfriend broke up with me because she was tired of the weight around her shoulder. And that was like the final straw for me to be like, okay, there's nothing for me in LA now. There's nothing for me in California. And I decided I had to do everything the exact opposite up to that point. And so that's when I decided to go sober. And that's when I decided to move back to Utah for a bit. And I decided to finally open myself up to talking to a therapist. For the longest time, I didn't want to talk to a therapist because as a writer, I thought a therapist would take all my good ideas from me. I was like, I can't talk to you because these are like, I need to write about these instead. And I told the therapist that. I was like, I'm afraid if I talk to you, I'm going to lose my creativity because I need to ruminate on things in order to make them funny.
Yeah.
And so I opened myself up to therapy. I opened myself up to books that I otherwise never would have read. A lot of like spiritual Toltec wisdom books, like the Four Agreements, stuff like that. And after like 3 or 4 months, I felt good. I felt like I'd pulled out of it. I moved back to LA, and then COVID hit, and I was like, well, shit, fuck. Now I'm in like the worst place ever for this to deal with this. I had just gotten my dog, and I just spiraled right back down again. And then I found out I was going to be a dad. And I was like, man, I am not in a headspace for any of this right now.
So it was totally unplanned.
Yeah, it all happened so quickly. And it was having my son that finally got me together enough to realize if I don't get my shit together, I'm not going to be there for this kid. And it's going to get much worse for him, my girlfriend, and myself if I don't get my shit together. And I'd heard friends talk about 75 Hard. I'd heard friends talk about Andy Frisella. I'd seen his stuff online. I didn't know who he was really. But him and I randomly just started talking online. And I was like, this is so odd. It's like one of those things I tell you about reconnectiveness. Kind of, I had just been thinking about his stuff, and he started reposting my quotes, and we started talking on DMs. And I was like, I think I need this regimen. I think if I do this regimen, it's going to force me to pull my shit together. And so really, I talked about this recently on his podcast. I tried that out of straight desperation. And the routine of it is what helped me get my shit together. And I'm more productive than ever. I feel my writing's better than ever. I'm genuinely, for the first time, content with where my life's at. Not to say that I'm not going to keep pursuing and doing more and more, but I don't wallow in my shit like I used to. And it's like I said earlier, I used to be so opposed to routine, but I attribute a lot of that to the routine and also just being open to new things. Like I was not open to the talk of spirituality until 2019. I was not open to the talk of anything God related. I thought it was fucking stupid. And I thought you were a Neanderthal if you believed there was a God above us. I thought it was like such a low level of thinking.
Yeah.
So I opened myself up to everything. And that's when life just kind of opened up for me as far as opportunities come at me quicker than I can, keep a track of them now.
Yeah.
And it really just all came from choosing to do the opposite of what I was doing.
Yeah. Do you find that with this influx of opportunity that you actually find it difficult to decide which ones to do?
No.
You don't?
No. I just do the ones that feel right to me.
Yeah.
I saw a documentary with Dr. Dre. I can't remember what it's called. And it was on HBO. It was a really good 4-part series. And he said, if I don't like the vibe of someone, I don't work with them. I don't do the project. And I was like, there's something to that, because in many times in my life, especially in advertising, I've taken on projects with people I didn't like, and they've always been awful.
Yeah.
So now it's like, if I like it, if it feels right to me, I just got to go for it.
Well, it's humbling that you're sitting on this fucking couch then.
This is one of those things I'm probably going to regret.
I hope so. I've done my job if you regret sitting there. No, to me, that's it's refreshing, and it's also very rare. Most people, I think, anybody, even with the purest of ideology in that regard, probably still finds themselves, I don't know that I'd say compromising, but maybe it's like if the upside is big enough on certain things, you're like, yeah, I could probably swing that. Or,
I think,
but
I think the fear is too, people fear if they don't take everything, they're going to lose out.
Yeah.
And I had that fear for sure, where I felt like I had to take on all my work.
Yeah.
But I realized that when I do that, the work I really enjoy doing suffers.
Yeah.
And so I'm better off doing fewer things really fucking well than half-assing like 6 things at a time.
Yeah.
And the things that appeal to me are the things I will do well, because I'll sink myself into them.
And you're passionate about
and
it.
it's the long game.
Mm-hmm.
There's stuff that comes to me with like money attached to it that I could make a lot of money pretty quickly. I get offered to ghostwrite a lot of books for executives and business people, and I haven't said yes to any of those, because it's like, no, the long game is I need to write another book of my own that I'm going to enjoy writing, and I won't make that quick paycheck, but in the end, it's going to be something I'm really proud of. And the hope is that after, 2 or 3 years of sustained sales through that book, it'll outpace whatever they would have paid me.
Sure.
Plus I would have enjoyed the process. And so that's something that came from being a dad for me, is that long-term thinking. I didn't have that at all until I started thinking about, what I want to leave behind. I started watching Yellowstone, realizing I really want to be a Dutton. And
that's another one of those things I still haven't watched.
See, that's the one show where the hype, it lives up to.
Have you watched Game of Thrones?
I've watched it off and on.
Dude, I was anti Game of Thrones for the longest time because everybody was so fucking high on it. I was like, dude, I refused to watch it because so many people watch it.
I have the box set. Someone gave me the box set as a gift.
Dude, it is good.
And I've popped in like 2 of the DVDs, I think. And I'll admit, incredibly well done.
Yeah.
I'm fearful of getting into something that takes that time away from me, though, because it does seem intriguing enough that I'll binge it and I'll lose a lot of productivity.
To me, it's worth it.
Yeah.
I really think it's worth it, because I'm the same way. Like, I don't watch a ton of TV, and I'm very particular about the shit that I'll say waste my time watching, because I do think it's largely a waste of time. But I think there are times where you need mindless, turn your brain off and let somebody else entertain you.
Yeah.
And stop fucking thinking. And I think, but to that, like, I don't want to, like, I'm not going to watch fucking Beavis and Butthead. Like, as funny and dumb as it is, like when I was a teenager, like, I watch a lot of movies. Like, I love watching movies. I just find a lot of the new ones suck. Yeah, for sure.
They don't make movies like they used to. They're not making Gladiators anymore.
No.
They're not making Matrix. They're not making Seven. They're not making that kind of stuff.
They're not even making funny shit anymore. I mean, even like the 80s Rat Pack shit, or like, Breakfast Club and 16 Candles and Ferris Bueller's Day Off, like shit like that. The John Hughes, half comedy, half relatable high school experience stuff. Now it's all like, it's so politically sensitive and correct, and just all of that, taking into account, every dynamic and every, checking every fucking box of every category that you can imagine, that just ruins fucking
I think the
everything.
problem with comedy too, those attention spans have changed.
Yeah. Thanks to a cell phone.
You can't set up the jokes they used to do in old movies, because no one wants to wait 15 minutes to get there. They want to watch a 15-second clip.
Yeah.
And you'll see that. I always point this out to people when you watch an older movie, how they do like the really slow build.
Yeah.
And they have to do like everyone that was involved. And now it's almost always a fucking flashback.
Yeah.
It always, the movie always starts with something really intense, And it's like, okay, now let's show you how we got there. But they have to immediately start with something in movies now because we don't have the patience for it.
I think it started with Vines. I think Vines is the
downfall
of humanity. Really,
yeah, I could see that.
Because it turned.
I never got into Vine. I never had a Vine account.
But that, I think, it's, what was it, 7 seconds? I think.
Yeah.
Because it's, that's the window of opportunity.
It's changed comedy completely.
Yeah, it's changed everything.
The long storytelling style of stand-up.
Yeah,
you still see comics do it, but it's not nearly as much thought as it used to be because they have to start rapid firing jokes because they're also looking to get snippets and clips so they can get promoted on social media because they want stuff that people will record and repost for them and share. And it's changed movies, it's changed writing, it's changed a lot of the creative world. And with musicians in particular, it used to be where your favorite band would put out an album every 3 years.
Yeah.
And it would be 13 songs that were fucking solid.
Yeah.
And now because it's so easy to produce and release, you got people putting out 2 or 3 albums in a year.
Yeah.
And they'll have 21 fucking tracks on it because they can't make up their mind.
And it's all computer generated.
Yeah.
bullshit.
And they'll just say, "Oh, I'll just do another album for this." And creators, just a pace at which they feel they have to create now. And that's something I've gotten better at too, where I used to feel like I had to tweet every day or post every day. And now I won't post for 2 or 3 weeks at a time.
Yeah.
It's made me more productive on the back end of things. When I'm not on social media, I'm actually working on real things like books or scripts for projects. Creators really need to learn to be patient with their craft.
Yeah. I similarly, I don't post a lot on any platforms. I mean, I have a social media manager that does most of it anyway. But even with that, I purposely don't give them very much content because I don't want shit going out every day or 5 fucking times a day. And
people that do 6 podcasts reels every day,
it's crazy. It's maddening.
Insane.
Yeah. I mean, I average 1 a week, in terms of the release, but I'll usually do, a couple in a week and then not do shit for the rest of the month,
Go race your cars.
Yeah, fucking A. But to me, back to that, not making it like they used to, whether it's music or movies, I find that especially so in you talking about music, and that I remember, growing up in the 90s and even in the early 2000s, especially because I was into heavy metal and grunge and alternative and rock and roll and
Good
whatever.
Stuff.
Is it when the radio came on, when a song came on, 3, maybe 4 seconds into it, you knew who it was by how it sounded. Now, it's all the exact same.
Especially in the rock genre.
Dude,
you're talking about all the guitars are tuned the same.
Yeah.
So my buddy's actually he's a guitar player in Seven Dust.
Oh no shit.
And Clint. And
that's awesome.
It was a couple of weeks ago on Twitter. He wrote something very similar. He said, it used to be where I could identify a band.
Yeah.
He's like, now I can listen to a whole song and not know who the fuck it is.
I mean, in the 90s, before there was even the internet, you're listening to the radio, Guns N' Roses, fucking Nirvana, Soundgarden.
Or you knew when Rage was coming on.
Nails, Rage.
Or I think one band that did a really good job at differentiating themselves was Korn.
Oh yeah.
Because of that low tune bass.
Drop.
In the 90s, you knew it was a Korn song. And then with System of a Down, they did a good job. That's probably one of my favorite bands.
Sure.
I think System of a Down, as far as creativity is concerned, did a great job separating themselves.
Yeah. Yeah, their Toxicity album, I think, is one of the best ever.
Yeah, my dad actually bought that album for me. My dad my dad was into that music growing up. I mean, sitting in his art room, when he's illustrating as a member of the Bishopric, he's listening to Led Zeppelin, White Zombie.
What the fuck?
I actually heard my first Rage Against the Machine song from my dad.
You're talking about breaking the fucking mold.
Yeah, my parents are great people. A lot of people meet my folks and say, if I didn't know, I would not have assumed any of this about them, because I think a lot of people have assumed ideas of what Mormons are.
Sure.
My parents are super down to earth, very chill. My dad loves making crude jokes, funny jokes. He has some of the best comedic timing of anyone I know when it comes to telling jokes. But he introduced me to all that stuff, because growing up I got into I was into Korn, I was into Silverchair, bands like that. But he was the one that showed me White Zombie, Rage. I think System of a Down, I heard from him first because some guy at his work was into him and he showed them to me. Yeah, I got a great connection with my dad about that music realm for sure.
Dude, that's awesome, man. I grew up, I was in high school in the mid 90s and or early to mid 90s, I guess. And I mean, to me, I think everybody thinks when they were in high school, that's when music was at its best.
But it actually was though.
But yeah, I really do think, the mid 90s.
For the rock genre for sure, I think 90s and early 2000s are when it peaked.
Yeah.
Every now and then I'll hear a song from a band now, and typically I'll like it just because it's like so ridiculously heavy.
Yeah.
That'll be what makes me like it. Or it'll be a band that goes the exact opposite and does something very slow and melodic.
Yeah.
But other than that, 99% of stuff, like I don't listen to music that much anymore. Honestly, I listen to a lot of books on tape now. Even when I'm at the gym, I used to feel like I needed like metal music.
Yeah.
I'll go to the gym now and put on Audible.
No, sure.
I'll have a great workout listening to like some book about some crisis we're having in the world about hunger.
Yeah. That's a trip.
It completely, I've just shifted what motivates me.
Yeah. For me, I'm not that way at all. Like I cannot listen to a book, an audio book. I can't do it. Like I get so fucking distracted with
That's how my girlfriend is. She can't
anything
stand
else. I mean, I'll find something to distract myself. Like I could sit in a pitch black room and I'd start itching I would figure out a way to focus on something else. I can't do it. I can't do digital readers either. It's got to be a real fucking book.
I much prefer the real thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, I probably do 4 or 5 audiobooks a month.
Yeah. Wow. That's wild. Music for me is huge. Like it's almost, not to sound like a
I was a tour manager at one point.
Really?
I was a tour manager on the Mayhem Festival with Rob Zombie.
How the fuck did you, where did that fit into this whole thing?
So the music has always been a huge love of mine. I played the drums growing up, and I really thought that's where I was going to go in life, was in a band. I wanted to be in a heavy band, like a metal band. And
that's great.
So yeah, I played the drums growing up. I had a friend of mine that I met in college who went on to be in a band called Butcher Babies.
I think I've heard of them.
And they fired their tour manager in the middle of, like right towards the end of a tour. And they called me out of the blue, and she said, "Hey, we fired our tour manager. We got this big tour coming up. It's going to be Rob Zombie's headlining. It's going to have like Amon Amarth and Five Finger Death Punch, and all these metal bands are going to be on it. And we need a tour manager, and you know music, you know drums, and you know business. You went to business school." She's like, "Do you want it?" And I was like, "Fuck yeah." So I quit my job and I went on tour like the next week. And so music was a huge part of my life for a long time. And music's probably one of the things that has been most, when you talk about life coming full circle for me, like talking about, my buddy Clint and Seven Dust. A lot of these bands I grew up, listening to, like Lamb of God and Seven Dust. I'm like friends with a lot of those guys now, either through my writing or through meeting them on tour. And it's just been such one of those holy shit moments where, my brother wanted, I can't remember what show my brother wanted to go to. He wanted to go to a concert in Utah. And I said, "Oh yeah, I know the bass player. Like I'll get you backstage passes." And my brother was like so blown away by it, and it made me kind of really just sit and be grateful for the connections I've made, to think that, I used to be in a realm where I looked up to all these men, and now like they're all friends of mine.
Yeah.
And you have those moments in life where I'm sure you have that too when you're driving some of your cars, where you just think, wow, I can't believe this is my life.
Oh, for sure. There's times often where I like have to slap myself and be like, how is this even fucking real?
But you need those times. That gratitude is what keeps you from being that young kid we were talking about earlier that became an asshole. Like you have to have gratitude for where you are. And that's something else I've gravitated towards strongly lately as well, is just being grateful for what is in my life. And, I don't know if you're open to that whole law of attraction kind of way of living, but when you have gratitude, and like I said earlier, the opportunities that come to me now, there's more than I can count. It really came from once I started just appreciating what I had and who I knew. And it's wild how something as simple as just opening your mind up to that just changes.
100%. And to me, I find that same thing, 10X with just helping people, like I would say you could border it on, not to get psychobabble on you, but almost from a codependent standpoint. Like I love helping people, like if I can make somebody's day or help somebody achieve a goal or what, like for me, there's almost a high or a reward or a dopamine hit that I get from helping somebody do something. You know?
I get that feeling sometimes when people do like a genuine favor for me too.
Yeah.
Like someone will do this, like something really unexpected for you, and you'll get like this wave of like a warmth almost, where you're just like, you get this hit of, you can't really explain it, but that's what I mean when I say I feel like we're all connected by some energy, because there's too many things like that just happen that they don't just
doesn't make
there's
sense.
There's some reason behind that.
Yeah. Well, I think human beings are exceptionally unique that way. Animals don't really do that for each other, you know. But on the same token, like, animals don't kill themselves either. You know, I mean, not like humans do. You know, I mean, there's some where they get to a certain age and like, all right, well, I can't fucking feed myself. I'm going to wander off and freeze to death or whatever. But there's not a high incidence of suicide within the animal kingdom anywhere.
I don't know if there's any. Is there?
Not really.
I can't think of any animal that happens.
Yeah, I mean, so that's a very unique to human experience that's hard to wrap your arms around.
Because we can ruminate. We can ruminate on the things that drive us crazy.
Yeah, it's the blessing and the curse of the human brain.
It is. Rumination makes you creative, but rumination will also make you crazy.
Yeah, absolutely. So John Bonham turned tour manager.
Yeah,
at what point in your career, like age-wise and ad company-wise, were you at when that took place?
I was 27. So I was working for a nutrition company at the time. I was probably a couple of years into like my formal writing career, and I was already on the fence about quitting the job I was at. I wasn't happy, and so it came at a perfect time for me. I just did it for one summer. I toured for about 3 months, and I got offered, to go on subsequent tours, but writing really was my passion, and I wanted to get back into it. Yeah. And I knew that if I spent too much time, essentially, as a tour manager, you're a glorified babysitter.
Yeah.
It's fun, but it's essentially what you are. It's hard. Anyone who's a tour manager knows it's a very demanding job. You don't have much time for yourself. I knew that if I just kept doing that, I wouldn't pursue my own goal in life. Yeah. Basically, I was facilitating other people pursuing theirs. And as much as I enjoyed being on the road, that didn't sit right with me.
Yeah, that makes sense. Fast forwarding now back to the mental health, if you want to call it a crisis, a breakdown, an episode,
whatever you want to call it. It was hell.
How long did that last?
Deeply, I was in it for probably 6 months.
And can you describe? I know depression gets. I think everybody has their idea of what that means, what it feels like, et cetera. But there's kind of both varying degrees and kind of a wide swath of experience that exists within people's experience with it. Can you describe what like legitimately depressed felt like for you?
It's one thing to be sad. Everyone's sad. I still get sad. Depression it feels like a fog that just never dissipates. And it's always sustained for a long period of time. Like, it's like, someone says, "Oh, I was really depressed for a couple of days." Like, you were sad.
Yeah.
Depression it's a long-term thing. That's why I say it was about 6 months. I can think of being really bad, where it's almost as if you lose like all your senses as far as your ability to enjoy things. Food tasted bad. Like I said, I got that book deal and I wasn't even remotely thrilled by it. It didn't even like shake me. It was just something that was like an email and I responded to and like moved on. You're just completely desensitized to the world around you, your connections. And a lot of it comes from learned habit. And my learned habit was my rumination, which, like you said earlier, is a blessing and a curse. I have to ruminate a lot as a writer. But when I started ruminating on everything I felt like I did wrong, or everything I felt like wasn't going right in my life, I lost gratitude for what I had. Like, I should have been very grateful for that book deal. I should have been very grateful for having a girlfriend who dealt with my depressed self as often as she did and as well as she did. But I wasn't. I was very selfish, and I think that's the confusing thing about depression is it's a very selfish thing, but at the same time, it's unselfish in the sense that you feel like you're a weight to those around you. And so that's what kind of makes people start wanting to end it, is you feel like you're weighing other people down. So there's almost like this idea of nobility about trying to end it to help others out, when you don't realize that the ripple effect of the repercussions of you doing that are going to be far more destructive than they ever are going to help. Like, you are going to taint or poison those people you love in a way that is incomprehensible.
Yeah.
Like for the rest of their life, those closest to you are going to think, what if I had said something? What did I do?
They're going to feel responsible.
They're going to feel responsible. And so if you're feeling the need to do it to save them, that's the exact opposite thing to do. Like you need to pull yourself together. And, you know, I use that word opposite again, because that's the only way I was able to do it. I had to do everything opposite.
Yeah.
I had to stop drinking. I had to read books that I otherwise thought were spiritual and dumb. I had to open myself up to the idea of something bigger than myself. I had to become comfortable with telling people no when I didn't want to do something. You know, I'd gotten into this people-pleasing realm, particularly in my hospitality career, where everything's, you know, around socializing. I felt like I could never say no to a party. Like I had to be at that party. I had to be at that event. I had to get comfortable with disappointing people to put myself first.
Yeah. You mentioned books that you read. You earlier mentioned the 4 Agreements. What were some other ones?
Mastery of Self, which was written by his son, Don Miguel Ruiz Jr., which, you know, is someone I also am friends with now, which is, it's crazy to me because that book, and I told him the Mastery of Self really pulled me out of some shit. And we now have a friendship where we talk, you know, probably on a weekly basis. And the Mastery of Life, also written by him, was great. I read a book called, I'm trying to think of what it was called. It Doesn't Start With You, I think is the title. I'm not sure, but it's a book about how, you know, learned processes are passed down in your genetic code, almost like, you know, the field of epigenetics.
Yeah.
Where trauma can be passed down from parent to child kind of idea. And whether you believe it or not, it's a good book because it helps you kind of open yourself up to the idea that we are a product of our environment, and there's things that happen to all of us that we can choose to either break that cycle or we can just be the next in line that affects.
Yeah.
And so having that mindset too of being someone who doesn't want to be a victim.
Yeah.
I've never wanted to be a victim of anything. And, you know, my younger brother, for example, he allowed like his upbringing to really weigh him down for a while. And he became a victim to circumstance. And I never wanted to be someone like that. You know, we had the same upbringing. We're from the same family. And so I wanted to do the exact opposite and be like, you know what? Our parents did what the best they could. I'm sure there's things about growing up in our religion that kind of like taught us to suppress. Like that was one of the things that I was really weighed down by in the Mormon faith is I learned to suppress a lot because it was just kind of something we did.
Yeah.
So I didn't talk a lot about things that were going wrong to me because when I talked about something that was wrong in my life, especially growing up as a teenager, when you're already confused, the answer was almost always, you know, read a scripture, seek God. Yeah. And that's not what I needed. What I needed at the time was like a human to talk to me like a human.
Yeah.
And so I just started suppressing everything because the answer, I didn't want to hear it. I didn't want to hear the answer was in some book, you know.
Sure.
I wanted my dad or I wanted my neighbor to relate to me on a human level. And so I had to get past the idea of suppressing things and talking to people. And it's reflected a lot in my work too, where I'm very open about, you know, you asked before we recorded this, or anything I won't talk about. And there's really not, because even the things that are hard to talk about, there's benefit to other people hearing it.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, those books, opening myself up to talking, like I said, talking to a therapist is all stuff that I was closed off to.
Yeah.
But once I was willing to try, it all changed for me.
Sure. I got a book from a good friend of mine. You know who you are. Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself. I haven't started reading it yet. Have you heard of this?
No, but it sounds like a good book to read already.
Yeah. Well, you can flip through it. No, I'm kidding. If you could read it for the rest of the episode, that'd be great. No, but I mean, stuff like that, agreed. Like in the last few years, I've completely turned my mind upside down to shit like that, you know, especially coming from like, you know, the military background, where it's like very stoic,
hardcore,
like
yeah.
Fuck everybody.
You
like
know, show emotion.
Yeah, handle your own shit, fucking stop being a pussy, you know, whatever. It's like, so like that, you know, and I spent, you know, from 18 to 30 in the SEAL teams, which is like the epitome of that type of bravado, double A.
I read Goggins' book. I know about
you know,
that
so like that's a hard thing to shake, you know, not that there isn't value in it, because there is, you know, there's been a lot of benefit that has come to taking the approach in some instances of, hey, fucking deal with it and figure out a way to.
At times that mindset's very beneficial.
Yeah, but not all the time.
Yeah.
You know, and that's a a crucial balance to strike, I think is, just like with the super religious versus anti-religious, the happy spot is the medium.
Well, it's just like with politics.
Yeah. Everything
like
is
that middle.
that
Life is gray.
Yeah.
All of life is gray. There's very few things in life that are black and white.
Yeah.
You have to learn to mix and mold things to get by.
Yeah. No, absolutely. When you were talking about the books, was there anything that was uncomfortable about mentioning those and how they helped you?
Not really. I mean, more so it's just I read so many in such a short amount of time. It's hard for me to pinpoint the ones that are the best. And so I want to make sure I mention the ones that are really good.
Interestingly, I'm not a body language expert, but I will say dog training is all body language and nonverbal communication. It's the only time during the interview that you crossed your arms.
It's because I wanted to make sure I mentioned the right ones.
Yeah.
I was like, I want to do service to the authors that really deserve it. And so I was trying to think of which books at the time really meant a lot to me. And, The Mastery of Self, like that was easy, like that one for sure.
Yeah.
But I just struggle to think what the other ones were because it's like when you ingest so much information so quickly, you kind of forget which book you got it from, but you'll take it with you in life. You'll know like, okay, this one paragraph really stuck with me. Yeah. And I don't want to avoid just saying the wrong one.
Maybe that's Dane Cook's excuse for stealing your quote.
Fuck that guy. He knew exactly what he was doing.
Yeah. Well, hopefully Unfuck America will make that list. I doubt it, given the stuff that you've done, but I hope you enjoy it at a minimum. All right. So from a current issue standpoint, like Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, social media in general, the mainstream media, there's this weird, like perfect storm and culmination of just this toxic, divisive, super politically charged, zero room for fucking understanding world that we live in. I'm curious, like when you go to bed or, wake up just during the day, what have you, when you think about kind of where we're at as a society, as a race of human beings, what sticks out to you as being kind of the top 3 or 5, like hotbed topics that, that are dividing people or that you feel strongly about, or are there?
I think the main thing that everyone's being divided on is we need to start having conversations in person again. I think we've lost the art of actually talking through problems, and a lot of the stuff doesn't belong on social media. As far as social media is not the right outlet to have some of these conversations because it is so divisive and it's character limited and you can't read body language like you were just talking about, and people feel very comfortable expressing their opinion online, but they won't do it in person.
Yeah. I think 100% with that. I mean, even the difference. I mean, I always prefer an in-person interview.
Well, that's why I was already going to be in Texas when we found out about this one. I was like, I'm definitely going to do that in person. I don't want to do it on Zoom or Skype or something.
It's just not the same. It's not even close to the same. But even something as simple as tone, inflection, volume. There's a lot of emotion that you read in people's voices that you don't get.
People need to have conversations with friends.
Yeah.
They need to be comfortable expressing differing opinions with friends. Yeah. And your friends need to be comfortable with your differing opinions. It used to be that like your friend could not agree with you, but you could still be a friend with them. And now people are so tribal in their wanting to be seen as right. And I think a lot of people now are afraid of being ostracized. Mm-hmm. They're afraid of being outcast, or they're afraid of, being canceled, if you want to use that word. So they just they self-censor themselves. Yeah. And social media is the perfect breeding ground for self-censorship, and that'll cause depression. Yeah. That'll cause anxiety. That'll cause a lot of stress in your life that otherwise you wouldn't have if you were willing to have conversations with people. I was talking with a clerk that was bagging my groceries at a Trader Joe's about 2 months ago. And I try and always talk with people when we're doing that because I like to have that moment to kind of connect with them. And he actually thanked me for talking to him.
Really?
Like he said to me, like very sincerely, he's like, thank you for having a conversation with me. And on one side, it made me feel good. On the other side, it made me be like, man,
we're fucked.
How fucked are people that this guy has to thank you for having a conversation with him? Like how many people are coming in here not talking to you?
Yeah.
And it's because everything is so politically charged, no one wants to have the conversation. You'll notice when you go out and you'll be talking to people, they'll wait until they hear your opinion.
Before they
start really opening up to you.
Yeah.
Like they'll ease into a subject and they'll see how you responded and they'll be like, okay, this is someone I can be myself with.
Yeah.
And that's what really needs to dissipate.
Yeah, no, for sure. There's a huge component, that in-person versus not thing that I see, watching my kids grow up and now that they're getting older, they're well into their teen years, seeing the generation of kids now and how socially inept they are, because there's if you look at a typical day for a teenage kid, especially over the last few years of all the COVID and mask bullshit, the amount of time that they spent when they interact with other human beings, how much of it is this versus how much of it is this. It's and it's 99%. I'm seeing somebody type me something. I'm not looking at their eyes and their facial expressions.
And you're not talking to a real person most of the time, because that person is being a subdued version of themselves, or they're pretending to be someone they're not. Like, it's just it's very hard to have a 100% authentic conversation with anyone on social media.
Agreed. And to me, like, there's the facial feature, social cue thing, but there's another element that I think a lot of people don't think of or realize until you kind of talk about it, which is giving somebody just enough time to think about what they're going to say, right? Whether it's text message on social media, like maybe you take 2 hours to decide how you're going to respond to something, is vastly different than how you're going to respond if you ask me a question right now. And
imagine if I took 2 hours to respond to every question. We'd have
take
one
two
question.
Fucking weeks. But it's like, what do you really what you really think is how you're going to respond to me in person, if you're willing to share that. Yeah. But that pause gives people and I talk about this in the book, is that people are understanding with the intent to respond, not to understand.
How do I respond in a way that's not going to get me judged?
Yeah, or to be right.
What do you think? What do I think this person wants to hear from me?
Yeah.
Or, for example, if you're responding in a comment section, how do I respond in a way that's going to get a lot of people to like my comment?
Right. Yeah.
Which, to me, you can very much tell in the comment section when someone is like, oh, this is going to be a crowd favorite.
Yeah.
So I'm going to say this, even though I probably don't agree with it, but everyone else is going to.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that was one of the I heard someone talk about this recently. When they added the like feature to social media comments, was really the downfall of good conversation.
For sure.
Because now people were performing to try and get attention. Yeah,
and all of them are so manufactured and thought out. I mean, it's almost like the world that you lived in advertising, or like PR work or even HR work, where it's like, what's our company's position?
Well, that's why I love that I worked in that realm, because I know behind the scenes, like I've worked on political campaigns. I've helped people get elected into office. And I know...
Any of them you're ashamed to have done that?
No, because the advertising agency I was working for, the owner was very clear in saying, he told me, he said, Kyle, if you're not comfortable with anything you ever have to work on, whether it's a product or a person, you don't have to.
Yeah.
We have another writer. We have other members of the team. If you like personally feel objected to it, and so I never worked on the political campaigns that were guys I didn't like.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it was eye-opening to see how some of these people were behind closed doors, or to hear the conversations that were had, or to know about how words were twisted, or to know that it was some guy like me in his mid-20s creating these campaign slogans that didn't really know what the fuck he was doing, other than the fact that it sounded clever.
Yeah.
To know that that's how it comes together, it's like, wow, this is kind of fucked.
It's a total fucking scam.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know shit about these policies, but I wrote that slogan because it sounds really good. That's how it was.
Yeah, that's fucking crazy, man. All right, so the hotbed topics that are pissing everybody off and are out there, I'm going to just list off a handful of them, and if any of them stick out as being something that you give enough of a shit about to give your opinion,
it's going to be gun control. It's going to be Roe v. Wade. Some other one.
Yeah, no, I mean two out of the list. So just politics in general, elections, guns, abortion, border issues, drugs, foreign policy, education system. Do you give enough of a shit about any of those things to take a stance or an opinion on?
The one I probably have the most, at least knowledge to give an opinion on, is guns, for example. I grew up in Utah. I grew up around guns. My Boy Scout experience was very different than most Boy Scouts, because my scout leader was, I'm not sure what he was, but he was a contractor for the government, and he went on extended hunting trips often. And
for people or animals?
This thing we don't know, because we always had our suspicions about him because we'd go on scout camps and he would teach us how to make bombs.
So it wasn't Ernest Goes to Camp. This is like fucking Rambo.
He would bring full auto guns that he had, and he would show us. He taught us how to reload bullets.
Yeah.
He taught us how to dig a snow cave and live in it. For like, my scouting experience was very crazy, but awesome.
Yeah.
And so I grew up around that stuff. I was very comfortable with it. I remember being, I was probably 13 or 14, being handed a fully auto and just shoot that direction kind of thing on a scout camp. And I never thought guns were bad. I mean, I grew up with a pellet gun. My dad got me a BB gun when I was a little kid. We used to shoot in our basement. And so it wasn't until I moved to New York that I realized how different some people viewed guns.
Yeah.
And it was just weird to me because I was so comfortable with them. And then when I moved to LA and started dating my girlfriend, she had never shot a gun before. And it comes down to this whole thing we're talking about, product for your environment. I was raised around them, so I'm very comfortable with them. I know they're a tool. I know what they're capable of. I know how to safely handle it. But my girlfriend, like, she basically viewed a gun like a hand grenade.
Yeah.
Like she said, growing up in California, we were basically taught if you touched a gun, it went off.
Yeah.
So I took her to a shooting range. I got her to shoot a 9mm handgun, and she was comfortable with it. And she was like, that was nothing like I thought it was going to be.
Yeah.
And then I always had shotguns and stuff. I never felt the need to have anything other than that. I did duck hunting growing up. And so I went years without having a gun. And about a year ago, with what was going on, my girlfriend actually said to me, she's like, you know what? I think we should get a gun. And I was like, I think so too. I think with the way the world's going, it's probably smart to have one. I haven't had one for a while. I'm comfortable with them. So I went and got like a home protection shotgun kind of thing. And then before we moved out of Vegas, I was like, you know what? I got my Vegas ID. I should probably buy another one while I can. So I went and got a handgun.
Yeah.
And so I have a little, home protection shotgun and a handgun right now. And I recently started hunting again because I wanted to have more of a connectiveness to like my realm, my world, my food. And I went hunting out here in Texas actually, and they had me use an AR. And I'd only shot an AR one other time. My brother had one probably 10 years ago. And nothing against them, but I never used one for anything other than like shooting at targets. And they had me use an AR to hunt wild boar out here. And I don't know if you've ever hunted wild boar, but you can put like several rounds in them and they still run. Yeah. And I was like, holy shit, like this actually makes a lot of sense to have an AR. And it completely changed the way my girlfriend felt about them too. Mm-hmm. And it really made me realize the whole anti-AR debate specifically is, no one needs one.
Yeah.
But there actually is practical use for them. But at the same time, the fact they don't want you to have one probably means you should.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Is the way I view it now. And I told my girlfriend, I was like, the fact they're saying no after what I've seen happen the past 2 years means we should get one. So I actually recently bought an AR.
Yeah.
And I used it to hunt wild boar just recently in Florida. So like I bought one that I could use for hunting, but I also bought one because they told me I shouldn't have one, which kind of backfired. It made me feel like I needed to have one. And so I'm not like I don't feel the need to own a lot of them, but I totally get it if you want to.
Yeah.
I plan to use mine, and like just to say again, it's the fact that they said no that made me want to have one.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, I think it's gone about in such a wrong way, from so many angles that a lot of people, have that same kind of thing. I think you can take it too far, but ultimately the reality of, it's either a free country or it isn't, like that. Well, you don't need this. It's like, well, you don't need a lot of shit. Yeah. Like, you don't need McDonald's. For that matter, I mean, I've used this argument. I use it in that book, and I've used it on a few podcasts too. Is that talking about school shootings and things of that nature. When you look at the data, which really is what should drive everything. Not to turn people, especially children, being killed into a line item or a number, but the reality is that the severity of issues is largely driven by the data that supports it or not. Mm-hmm. And if you look at school shootings in particular, and how many children on average per year die in those versus drowning in backyard swimming pools, it's disproportionately swayed towards the drowning in backyard swimming pools. Way more kids drown in a fucking 8x12 swimming pool in your backyard than get shot in a school environment every year. No, there's no campaigns to drive cement trucks all over neighborhoods and fill people's swimming pools in because, well, you don't need a fucking swimming pool in your background, right?
Well, I think the reason why is because one is seen as an accident and one is seen as very intentional. And so it's the intentional aspect of a shooting that makes it so alarming to people.
Yeah, I mean, agreed, but data is still data.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, the fact is that in terms of evaluating or placing a value, a numbered value on a problem, is that is the reality of it. You know, is that I think there's an emotional response, and yes, like I'm a father, I get it. Like there's been instances at my kids' schools before where they've been locked down, where there's a potential something or other, and there's that split second of thinking, holy fuck. You know, what is going on there, you know, and you have no idea and you can't get a hold of them. And there's a fucking, bulletin put out, citywide that this school is shut down and there's an active shooter scenario. And it turns out that some dude, flashed a pistol at Walmart nearby or whatever, but either way, like your mental, thought process is the same thing, is that there's a visceral and extremely remote, emotional response to seeing a child murdered in a school environment it's supposed to be everything the exact opposite of that. Mm-hmm. But the fact is that, you don't need swimming pools, you don't need Snickers bars, you don't need McDonald's. Is one more intentional than the other? Yes, but at the end of the day, the fact is that far more kids die of obesity and cancer and drowning and a lot of other shit that nobody talks about. Whereas, there's also, while there's intent, from a school shooter or a mass shooter in that regard, there's also a benefit to, firearms and there are a lot of good that can come out of them also, so.
Well, yeah, exactly. And you've seen a lot of people, point out the fact that a lot of these politicians that are pulling for gun control are protected by people that have the exact same things they're trying to get rid of.
Same thing with border walls and having, fences around the house.
I think it comes down to making sure someone's responsible with it. And, I use this example with my girlfriend. Like I said, I have an AR now. I would be perfectly fine with them raising the age to get a semi-auto weapon to the same age you need to rent a car, because I couldn't rent a car until I was 25.
Yeah.
Why is that? Like, how come you can't get a car till you're 25 and then you can drive one at 16? I would be perfectly fine with them raising the age to something similar to that. I think it's obviously going to upset a lot of people. Yeah, I mean, when you're young and if you're young and you like shooting, they're very fun to own a weapon like that. It's fun to go shoot a weapon like that. But if you had to raise the age of it, and if it somehow could be proved that it got it into more responsible hands, I would totally support that. But even then, the age doesn't prove responsibility either, because you got people that are 40 that are pieces of shit. Yeah. You got kids that are 18 that are very respectful. Yeah. And so I think, there's not an easy solution to it, but I think there needs to be more gun education.
To me,
I think people need to be, most of the people, like I said, with my girlfriend, for example, who weren't around guns, think they're something they're not.
Yeah, they don't understand them.
Yeah.
I think education, like with most things in life, is the key. Is that shitty decisions, overcorrections, emotional responses are usually out of ignorance.
Yeah,
in every way.
And I don't know how that looks, but I think if there's more education towards it, I think people would change a bit.
I mean, to me, it's simple if you look at it from a historical standpoint, which I'll get into in a second. But to your point on raising the age and why I would disagree with it on two fronts potentially. To me, it's worth talking about. But to me, like prescription medication is a good example of the road to hell being paved with good intentions, or intentions on having a check and balance or a gatekeeper of sorts to keep prescription meds, opiates, et cetera, out of the hands of kids or people that don't hold that prescription. Doesn't fucking work. It either comes from Mexico or, like you said, like, oh, you got a prescription? Well, I'm going to hook my buddies up.
Exactly.
So it's like, it's not any different with guns, right? Yeah. I mean, there's a fuck ton that come out of Mexico and everything for that matter. I mean, heroin, right? It's a federal offense or a federal felony in all 50 states with the exception of maybe Oregon now. But either way, like, here in Texas, right, having heroin is a felony, right? But I'll tell you right now, with $200 in your pocket and about 20 minutes of going anywhere in Dallas, you can find it, right? So it's not an issue of like, if people are naive enough to think that passing certain laws are going to keep guns, whether it's loopholes or, you know, the boyfriend loophole, the gun show loophole, whatever, like that's a fool's errand that makes politicians feel like they're doing something, and uneducated dipshits who are naive think that they're solving problems, and they're not.
Well, that's why I say I don't know what it looks like, and I think it's a slippery slope.
To me, it's education.
I think that's the only thing you only answer. I just don't know how to do that.
I mean, so guns from a restriction standpoint are harder to get now than they ever have been in the history of the country, right? Strangely enough, ironically enough, coincidentally enough, is that, you know, more mass shootings and gun violence is enacted on people now than it ever has been before. 60, 70 years ago, you could order firearms out of the Sears catalog and they would mail them to you. At that same time, most public education had firearm safety as part of the curriculum, the same way that they had driver's education. I think both of them should still be implemented in all public education so that you don't have that. Yeah. I don't know what it is, and I'm scared shitless of it because it's loud and it can kill people. If you've never ridden in a car, right, never driven a car, barely ever even seen a car, and now you're 19 years old, right, and you throw somebody in a fucking Ferrari, they're going to shit themselves, right? So, I mean, to me, it's really no different that way, is that there's been this strange, ironic, unintended consequence of trying to take them away from people and not exposing children to them because, they're dangerous, so lock them up and never let them see them. Like, that does them a disservice, because now there's this weird boogeyman syndrome as it relates to these things that, just like with anything else, that whether it's like I'm bored and I want to sound tough, or the street cred of trying drugs or whatever else, is that guns now have this weird, faux pas attached to them that either attract people and the wrong people because they don't understand them, or make people that don't understand them scared shitless of them.
Well, and I think you brought up a good point too. Or you said they're harder to get than ever. I didn't realize how difficult it was to get an AR. Yeah. Like when I decided I wanted to get one, I did my research. I was like, okay, I want this one. This one's going to be dual purpose. I ordered it, and I didn't realize there was a 5-day waiting period in the state of Florida. They call it like a cooling off period. And I told my girlfriend, I was like, all this stuff you're hearing on the news, they make it seem like you can go in and just buy one. Yeah. I was like, I have a perfectly clean record. Yeah. I have nothing on my record. I did a full background check, and I still had to wait 5 days. No one talks about that being a thing. Yeah. Like, and it's only if you've been through it yourself that you understand, like, wait a minute, there already are, a lot of these parameters they're talking about are actually already in place. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I have a concealed weapons permit here in Texas, which is good in like 37, 38 other states. But even if I buy a firearm here in Texas, I still have to fill out the application, and they still have to do a background check every single time. It's like, they know I have, however many fucking guns already. I have them sitting at my house. I have ammo. Oh, you want to buy another one? You still have to fill this out, and we still have to run a background check and still go through all that. Even with all of my training, having a concealed weapons permit in the state of Texas, which is arguably, outside of probably Alaska, the easiest state in the union to be able to buy firearms, and I still have to go through all that. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I think, like with most things, is that it really boils down to ignorance. How do you think that education looks? Like, how would they do that? Is it something that's like a mandatory? Yeah, I think for all age group, at a certain age group. Yeah,
I think just understanding, like a range safety officer brief, right? Is that, hey, here's how they work, right? And some couple simple things. If you're going to pick one up, be able and understand and know how to safely inspect it, to make sure that it's either loaded or not loaded. Understand how to check that. Don't put your finger on the trigger unless you're ready to shoot it. Don't point the barrel of the gun at anything that you're not willing to shoot.
Because I remember growing up in Utah, now we're talking about it. I remember in elementary school, a police officer coming to my class. I probably would have been in 4th or 5th grade, based on the school. And I remember a police officer giving us a briefing like that with a firearm.
Yeah, I mean,
I don't know if that's something that happens in other states, or maybe because I was in a small town in Utah, but I remember that being a thing.
Very rarely now, you know, and to me, like a basic, whether it's NRA or CCW, you know, any state sanctioned requirements for concealed weapons carry, I mean, whatever it is, just a basic firearms safety class where it's like, now you understand how it works, you understand how to pick one up properly and how to be safe with it, and then shoot it, so that everybody knows how to do that, and so that it removes the holy fuck, what is that? You know, I mean, to me, it's like a nudie mag that you find in your dad. Like if you you see the cover and like you see, you know, the box that he slides, you know, under his bed, you know, or whatever. But
when
you
it's
never
secretive, it seems a lot more powerful.
Yeah,
than
it's
it
like,
is.
no, it's in the safe. No, I don't even want you looking in the safe. Oh, it's my gun. Let me put it away real quick. And kids are naturally like, well, what the fuck is that? I want to finger fuck that. I want to know what the deal is with that thing. So take that essence away from it. And so now if everybody understands how they work, understands how to pick one up safely, understands how to shoot it safely, so much of that stigma attached to how dangerous they are gets erased. You know,
I would agree.
And to
like
me,
my girlfriend's completely flipped on them.
Yeah,
like
for that reason.
After she's used one a few times,
right?
And when we got that shotgun for home defense, I got one of those little short, like Mossberg shockwaves, I think they're called. I made sure she put like 50 rounds through it. I said, the worst thing you can have is a gun you're afraid of.
Sure. Yeah.
Like, we need to go shoot this. We were out in the desert of Nevada at the time. And she grew to kind of like it. She's like, oh, this is actually kind of fun. Like, I understand how to load it now. Yeah. I can shoot milk jugs with it. And she is just like, her whole family's all still in California. Yeah. And they probably will not understand it unless they get the same experience with one.
Yeah. I think that's the key. And that's the key with everything. I mean, any of these issues that you talk about, most people, and I think ironically enough, you know, the people that are usually the squeakiest wheel on a lot of these issues are oftentimes the most misinformed or underinformed on them. You know,
I say it's true with a lot of things. Not just gun control for sure.
Yeah, like they have a couple of bullet points that are emotionally just like what you used to do for a living. People that are very calculated in how they're presenting this problem, pissing people off that don't even really understand what they're pissed off about, and now they're spewing that same stuff and trying to drum up this, you know, national movement to go march on fucking Capitol Hill or whatever and bitch. Well,
it's like what you just said. I remember I was talking to someone else about this. I think I told you this too. When I was looking what happened the first part of 2 years ago, seeing the headlines, the way they were written. And I have a lot of peers who are editorial writers who write for news stations. And like I said, like I told you, they're very talented. And I would look at the headlines they'd write, similar to these bullet points you're talking about, and I could see the word they chose and the why they chose that word. And I'd be like, you motherfucker, man. I know exactly what you're doing. I know you're charging this headline. And a lot of people are starting to finally catch on to that. But there very much is that technique used in every part of a polarizing topic. Because there are those people, the PR teams that are working for politicians are some of the highest paid you'll ever find.
And they're brilliant.
Because they're brilliant. They know exactly. They could do it with either side of the argument. You could hire them for either side of the argument, and they will know exactly what to say to get the reaction they're wanting.
So essentially, whatever headlines you see, you know who has the biggest bankroll.
Right.
It's whoever's paying these brilliant fucking advertisers the most money. Yeah, no shit. Because it's such a big ticket item here lately, do you have a position on abortion? I don't want to get too far into the fucking rabbit holes of.
I'm fine talking about it to the extent that I do believe it needs to be available. I think the solution to that is there needs to be some kind of cap on when. I don't know when that is. I don't know enough about it medically, but it has to be an available option. Especially being a new father myself. And if you're not ready to have a kid, you should know that, and you should know it fairly quickly. And you should make that choice quickly. That's part of being a responsible individual, is making a choice and sticking with it. And if you regret it later, that's also part of life. Life is hard. A lot of life is difficult to deal with. And it needs to be available with, rape, incest, mother's health. There's times when an abortion is it's not the preferable option, but when you're faced with something horrible, it becomes the most preferable option.
Yeah.
So I do think it needs to be available. I just think there needs to be some kind of cap on when.
Yeah.
Because at some point, I do believe that is a life. It is a child. And if it has gotten to the point where it is a child and you still haven't made up your mind, like you should have made up your mind sooner.
Yeah.
Like at that point now, you take responsibility for it and you find a way to raise this kid.
Yeah.
You find a way to go on with life. And then if you end up regretting what you did later on, I mean, life's hard.
Yeah.
Life's hard. I don't think there's any way to avoid pain in life. I don't think there's any way to avoid regret, and there's no way to avoid making tough decisions.
Yeah. I agree. I think it's too often it's oversimplified.
It's so complex. And this is like when I talked about earlier about conversations to have on social media. This is not a conversation to have on social media.
Yeah. And it's one of those things where it's like people are so emotionally charged about it that you can't even fucking reason with them though.
Yeah.
You know, it's like their brain is not reachable. You know, there's a lot of similarities between human behavior and canine behavior. And this is one of them though, is that, you know, the higher the emotional charge is, the less logic and reasoning that exists. Mm-hmm. And so when dogs are loaded in fucking drive, you know, it's one of most dog owners' biggest issues is impulse control. And dogs, whatever their drives are, some are way higher than others, but there's something that they want, and that level of desire brims and simmers to a point where it starts to boil over. And then that's when they're trying to reach their dog's mind. Hey, my dog is super leash reactive, so okay, we'll put him on a leash and get him around a dog that's trying to rip his fucking head off, and we'll deal with it. That's not the time to fucking deal with it. The time to deal with it is when there's something that he kind of wants, where you can still reach his mind and teach him, hey, even though I know you want that, you have to wait to get it or something that you want, whether it's a reward, depending on what the dog is driven for. If it's affection, then that. If it's a ball on a string, if it's food, if it's, the absence of pressure of me being close to it, if it's an aloof dog that doesn't like fucking personal attention, I mean, whatever it is that is in essence the reward. And that's going to vary from dog to dog. But similarly is that, you know, when people try to reach that dog's mind when they're at a level 12 out of 10, you have two options. You're either going to pick a fight with the fucking dog, or you're going to crush that dog's spirit to the point where you completely stifle his drive.
Well, you have to meet him at the same level. If they're already operating at a 12, you got to meet him at a 12,
13.
which is not the right way to do it a lot of the time.
Yeah, I mean, only two things are going to happen. If it's a really strong dog that has a lot of backbone and spine, you're going to be wearing that fucking dog and he's going to redirect it on you, or the level of punishment or uncomfort is going to be so severe that you completely crush the dog's spirit and shut him down. You know, so it's a lose-lose. But my point is that, you know, abortion being one of those things is that, you know, there's such a heavy emotional charge to both sides, to where it's like you can't even reason with somebody when it's like, if you're not just so vehemently opposed to it, then you're a fucking murderer and I want to kill you because of it. Or on the other side, like if you want to fucking regulate anything that I have going on, then you're a fucking Nazi and I want to kill you because of that. And it's like,
that's what we just talked about earlier. I mean, there's nothing black and white about life.
Yeah.
Like, I think most of us, if we were willing to find common ground these days, which is very rare because we've been forced into these ideologies on either side, we would find that there's a lot of pro-life and pro-choice in each of us.
Yeah.
Like a lot of humans, like we have the same emotions. We can relate really well to each other if we allow ourselves to relate.
Yeah.
And we're just not doing that. And social media is one of those primary walls that keeps people from doing it.
Yeah, I mean, it's a petri dish for assholery, if that's a word, you know.
Well, and just performatism.
Yeah.
Either you're going to go on there to pick a fight and be an asshole, or you're going to go on there and perform and say stuff that you don't really mean because you're afraid of being seen as one of these ends of it. You're afraid of being ostracized. You're afraid of being called something. Yeah. And so you perform, and every time you do that, it just becomes more and more of your, you know, like that book, you know, Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself. It becomes more and more of a habit for you to perform. And then next thing you know what your opinion is on anything.
Yeah. Yeah. Everything is calculated with this, like, how is it going to be received? You know, before I give you my opinion on anything is how are you going to take it? How are the masses going to take it? And I think one of the biggest contributing factors to that is corporate America taking stances now on everything, you know, and shutting people down. And because we're in such like an e-commerce platform societally, financially, is that it's so easy for companies to say, I don't like what you did. I'm gonna cut your nuts off financially because of the stance that you're taking. And now everybody's, tiptoeing around on fucking eggshells about what they think because they're worried that, they're going to lose their job. They're going to lose a sponsorship. They're going to lose, fucking whatever, because everybody is so overly sensitive about it.
Initially, it was a brilliant marketing strategy to be the first corporation that took a stance.
Yeah.
Like 4 or 5 years ago when you didn't see it happen often. I mean, from an advertising perspective, if you were willing to take that risk, it paid off big time because a lot of people talked about it.
Yeah.
But like you're saying, now it's become so commonplace that people know when it's disingenuous.
Yeah.
And 99% of the time it is.
Yeah.
Because again, I've worked for companies that have been like, oh, it's such and such month. Oh, it's this holiday. We need to release this. It's like, why though?
Yeah.
Because you feel you have to? Do you actually mean any of this?
I also feel like it's a lose-lose too, because, generally speaking, pick any of these issues, it's pretty 50-50 on them.
It is.
And so taking a stance, you're going to alienate half of your customer base,
If you're willing to take the stance because you genuinely believe it and you know it's going to crush your bottom line, I actually kind of respect that.
For sure.
If you're like, you know what, I own this business and I feel strongly about it, go for it. But if you're just going to do it just to try and perform, then I agree. Like the risk of it is never going to outweigh the reward.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. So what do you have going on now? Like what's next?
I just finished up a pilot script for a TV series that I'm hoping to get made. It'll be like an adult animated series.
Oh, cool.
So it'll be very fucking crude.
Some like Bob's Burgers kind of shit or what?
Yeah, but more like history based.
Oh, that's cool.
Kind of based on some of my other books. But I like the idea of doing it because it's a new creative realm for me to get into. And it'll be something that allows me and the other writers that I've worked with, very talented, to, like you're saying, talk about some of these issues in ways that you can't talk about in other platforms.
Yeah.
Like you'll find that when you have a cartoon character, you can make jokes you're not supposed to make. You can make points in ways that you couldn't make otherwise because you can kind of touch that third rail that a lot of people avoid. So
it's like Triumph the comic dog talking shit to people's faces, but because he's got a fucking Rottweiler puppet.
Yeah. So I think it'll be fun because I think it'll also kind of bring back some of the comedy that I think has been lacking.
Yeah.
Like there's those ones that are like, Family Guy, tried and true. They never change their formula. And that's why Family Guy is always funny.
Yeah.
I respect that kind of writing a lot. I also just finished a series of children's books.
Really?
Which I was really enjoyed working on, harder than I thought it was going to be to write.
Is it like little Johnny finds his dad's porno mags or what?
No, like real tried and true children's books. Growing up, I always really enjoyed Shel Silverstein as a writer, and I really enjoyed Dr. Seuss.
Yeah.
And I actually have an original Dr. Seuss in my house that was given to me through a friend of my dad's. And I've always enjoyed that style of creativity. I enjoyed the challenge of infusing a fairly complex lesson into a children's book. And so I wrote the first one. It's being sold to publishers right now. My dad's actually illustrating it.
Oh, that's awesome.
Which has been a really cool project for us to work on together. And again, I liked it because it's out of my traditional realm.
Well, and both of those authors here recently have taken kind of a lot of heat for some of the concepts that they have in their books too.
Yeah, but their concepts are like, they're those ones we talked about that are evergreen.
Yeah.
Like the stuff they wrote about is stuff that's perpetually going to be human behavior. I mean, Huckleberry Finn came across some cancel culture stuff because it talks about, race and stuff in it.
Yeah.
But it's always going to be a thing. And that's what the issue with trying to censor books is you censor like messages that need to be heard just because they're uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Like uncomfortable messages are still valid, if not more valid than other messages, because the discomfort is what creates learning.
Yeah.
So I enjoyed the children's books. It was something different for me. And then I'm also kind of poking away here and there at a memoir because I kind of feel like I'm at a point in my life. I used to think it was fairly braggadocious or kind of self-serving to write a memoir unless you were like over 50. I was like, you got to be an old guy to write a memoir. Like you have to have some weathered years. But
I think you have to have some.
I've had enough people come to me and from all walks of life and different age groups and find because my trajectory in life has been very odd. Like I've had a lot of different jobs and a lot of careers and kind of been all over. And I do feel like that I can offer something worth reading.
Yeah.
So I kind of got over that hurdle of feeling like it was too self-serving. I've started writing that, and I've really enjoyed that too because, again, it's something different. it's where I'm at in my career now is I'm trying to not do a lot of the same things.
Yeah.
Like I did for my first few books were kind of a part of a series. They were all very similar. I've lost a desire for a lot of that writing. I want to challenge myself, and I also want to challenge my readers, and I want to challenge my publishers to have to sell books that they're not used to selling for me.
Yeah.
I want to give them a challenge and be like, you know what, I'm making a shift. I'm a children's book author now.
Yeah.
So I'll figure out a way to make it work. It excites me. It's fun to me.
Yeah.
And it all comes back to what we talked about this whole time, is just opening myself up to different things.
Yeah.
Like the past couple of years, I've opened myself up to so much experience and new material and ways of thinking. It's changed the way I approach almost everything in my life, my relationships with my friends, my work, what I enjoy, my hobbies. Like it's all different now than it was 4 or 5 years ago. And I'm so much more content and just happy with it.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree more, and I'm right there with you. I mean, if I look at the last 10 years of my life and how much things have changed, hobbies, what I give a shit about, relationships, personal and professional, that I have and don't have, like it's massively different.
Isn't it a good place to be?
I mean, I wouldn't trade it for anything.
Because at the time when you're very hard-headed,
yeah,
you take it as a sense of pride,
yeah.
Especially because you often hear like, "Oh, don't change," and so you wear it as a badge of honor, like I'm being myself.
Yeah.
But really, you don't realize you have blinders on.
For sure.
And then it's like we talked about, there's a nuance to everything. There's some times in life when you need those blinders on. Mm-hmm. You need to focus and you need to not be distracted by what other people think of you. But then there's times in life where you have to take them off. And when you do, you're like, wait a minute, there's a whole fucking world out here I haven't discovered. And then you dip your toe in that water and you realize it's incredibly like relieving almost.
Yeah.
Like you a lot of tension from your body and stress from your everyday just dissipates when you open yourself up to, especially being wrong.
For sure.
Like I am so okay with being wrong. Like when I was in advertising too, as a creative director, the way structures and hierarchies work in advertising, the creative director is like the last say on everything. And I always felt the need to get my point across. I always felt the need to have my idea be the idea. And I did a lot of disservice to my own career, but also the people I was mentoring below me because I was hard-headed in that sense. And if I were to go back to advertising now, which I don't see happening, I would probably be far more creative and far more successful because I'm okay with being wrong.
100%. I mean, and I think there's a ton of authority and power in saying that too, to the people. Like if it's a gotcha moment of like, hey, you fucked this up and you shouldn't have done this and you handled this wrong, you're like, you're right. I did fuck that up.
And the way you accept, like people will try and do that to you to embarrass you.
Yeah.
But the way, if you accept it with grace and like, you know what, you kind of brush it off.
Yeah.
They go, oh,
there's nothing. It's like, well, fuck, I can't pin them down now.
They respect you so much more.
Yeah. And you see,
whether they admit it or not, they do.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And you see that, in any position of authority or leadership that rarely happens, especially in politics, but police chiefs, whatever. It's like, that's one thing. I mean, whatever you think of Donald Trump, I mean, there's certainly, I think, a lot of ways he could have handled it better. But one thing, at least on a principled level, that he was good at, not necessarily taking accountability for fucking up, but just being like, yeah, I said that. Yeah, I did. I'd say it again. But just that kind of mentality of taking accountability for fucking things up. I mean, not caring about it, but being like, yeah, you know what? I could have handled that better. I should have done this instead of that. And you're right. I fucked that up. Like it's hard for somebody to keep coming after you after that. It's impossible, really.
So the way that would work as a politician is the first couple of times they did it, the opposing, media outlets would have a field day with it.
Yeah.
But eventually they'd realize it was a waste of time.
Yeah.
And your PR team would be out of a job.
Immediately.
And so you would get a lot of pushback. But after you did it, like even if you just did it over the course of like a month, your ratings and the respect you would have for the people would skyrocket.
Yeah, and
but they're not willing to take those first. It's like everything in life. The first couple of steps are going to be very rocky, and you're going to get some shit. Especially, like, I flipped on the TV in my hotel room last night, and I don't even have TV at home, and it was on Fox News, and I haven't been watching the news really at all through any of this. And I had no idea how much they attack each other on news these days.
Oh, it's crazy.
I had never heard a news anchor talk like that. Because I remember, when I was watching more news, it's probably 7-8 years ago, I'd never heard news anchors go after each other like that.
Yeah, it's brutal.
And I was like, I told my girlfriend, I was like, holy shit.
Yeah.
No wonder people are the way they are if you're watching this all day. And I was like, I bet if we flip to like CNN or the other one, it's going to be the exact same aggression, meeting, like I say, meeting people at 12s.
Yeah.
I didn't realize news anchors were doing that as extremely as they were.
Yeah, there's no two ways about that. And I think, leadership is leadership, whether it's on the macro level of being the president or the micro all the way down to being a fucking parent. Like the parallels that exist are the exact same, in principle, and that same thing with kids. Like if your kid calls you out on something and you calmly acknowledge, like, I did overreact to that. I thought I had all the information. I didn't. You were right. You didn't do this, and I overreacted. It's my bad. Like, then your kid's like, what the fuck just happened?
You know how much more capable they're going to feel? How much more confidence they're going to have?
I mean, number one, like they will come to you with legit problems and trust that your response is going to be fair and level enough to where they can tell you anything because they know you're not going to rip their fucking head off. Now, that doesn't mean that there aren't consequences. Mm-hmm. But, as a new parent, if there's one piece of advice I can give you is that the younger they are, the less that applies. I mean, they're more like raising puppies when they're 2, 3, 4 years old, but the older they get, the more that parallel drifts apart as far as how training dogs and raising kids are. But that example of leadership is tried and true the whole way through it, and I'm speaking from experience of fucking that up. When they, as they got 8, 9, 10 years old, of wanting to never be wrong because, well, I'm their dad and I need to set this example of always getting it right. And it's like, well, you don't always get it right. You've made bad decisions. You've done dumb shit. You were their age once and fucked things up. Even as an adult, like you overreact or you have a bad day or you see things the wrong way or you don't take accountability or whatever it is. And by coming clean and being real calm about it, I mean, one of the best pieces of advice that I've mentioned, I don't know how many times on this show to different people now, but that I've probably ever gotten as it relates to, especially with kids, but I think even with talking with adults is being the thermostat in the room and not the thermometer. Set the temperature, don't reflect it. Especially with kids is that if you're setting it at 72 degrees and not allowing it to spike to 98 or to 104. Is that your quote? No, I wish it was.
Like Dan Cook will steal that if it is.
Yeah, no, I wish it was.
That's a good one.
Yeah, no, I mean, I say it all the time, and no, it actually came from a friend of mine's girlfriend who's a therapist, and he
it's
told
incredibly profound.
Yeah, I mean, it's so simple, but Jesus Christ, like it's so apt for that environment. It's like it's so easy to wrap your mind around that, but it's equally so crucial in that I have found that one element of taking that ideology into any issue with a child makes it night and day different. Instead of getting pissed off at them and raising your voice and overreacting or whatever, is always think, I need to set the fucking tone here. And when you leave it at that, like, it makes everything easier. I mean, every fucking part of it, I mean, I can't recommend that mentality enough,
I love that.
Yeah. But, all right. So now that we got the Dr. Phil segment out of the way here.
It's important stuff though.
Yeah, no, I agree. Is there anything else that you want to cover or talk about as we wrap up?
I think I'm good. I think I had a great time.
Yeah.
A good conversation.
Amen. Likewise. Yeah. Thanks for coming, man. I know you were kind of in town anyway, or at least in the state.
Yeah.
But these in-person one-on-ones are the only way to do it. So I appreciate.
Yeah, I mean, you can't preach about the perils of social media, not having real conversations
over social media,
and then be like, hey, let's do this over Zoom, buddy.
Yeah, no shit. Yeah, walking contradiction. Well, thank you again for coming. I appreciate it. Where can people find you?
Social media on Instagram and Twitter, SGRSTK.
What does that come from?
So in college, I had a little clothing brand called Sugar Steak. And that was just like the abbreviated, pulled the vowels out of it.
Yeah.
And so I had like a couple thousand followers on it on Twitter when it was like the little clothing brand. Yeah. It's like the first time I've ever answered that question on a podcast, by the way.
Oh, fucking. At least I got one original question.
I usually refuse to answer it, but he caught me in a vulnerable spot. So yeah, it was a clothing brand I had called Sugar Steak, and it was I did like screen printed t-shirts.
Yeah.
And so I just kept the handle, and I was going to change it. And then I had like my following started growing. I was like, shit, if I change it now,
I'm gonna lose everybody.
Like, people aren't gonna know how to tag me. Yeah. And I was like, all right, I just gotta own it. We're just sticking with it now.
Yeah, that's funny, man. Oh, it's kind of like the Rum Tongue publishing company, right? So
yeah, but that was like a joke between me and my accountant.
Still, yeah.
And now it's like it's actually a great name. I think.
It's awesome. Yeah, it's fantastic. So that's where you find him. For you ladies and gentlemen that are listening, thank you for tuning in. If it weren't for you guys showing your support episode after 4 years of doing this, I would not have the pleasure and honor to continue to sit behind this desk and interview such interesting guys, such as the captain. So thank you for tuning in. If you didn't like it, feel free to choke yourself as always. And until next time, this is Mic Drop.